Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Хотите жить – бегите. Хотите жить – сдавайтесь в плен. Россия не получит новую территорию Украины. Россия присоединит себя к той катастрофе, которую она принесла на оккупированную территорию нашей страны. Оккупант заполняет могилами захваченную территорию Украины. И все больше могил на территории самой России. Ценой того, что один человек в России хочет продолжать эту войну, кто хочет войны больше, чем жизнь, вашей жизни, граждане России.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 573 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again after a very successful Sunday fundraiser night, if I can speak.
And of
welcome
course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And before we do, I do have to congratulate everyone on this channel for raising $9,000. And let me actually make sure I get the correct number. $9,674.30 for Doctors Without Borders over this Sunday fundraiser. Despite being
That's a hefty sum.
That is quite a hefty sum for sure. And despite getting age restricted, literally, I think like 20 minutes into the stream, the Lee Spring Army still killed it and still blew the fundraiser well beyond its fundraiser goal. The fundraiser goal was only a mere $5,000, and the Lee Spring Army was able to make it a whopping $9,700 nearly. It is an amazing amount to think that we were able to help out Doctors Without Borders with, and hopefully they will be able to continue to save the lives of folks in Ukraine through that support. Of course, Doctors Without Borders has been incredible the entire war, and they continue to remain incredible and help save more lives than can ever be thought of by most nonprofits and most organizations in Ukraine. But moving on from that,
Man, we killed the fundraiser so badly on Sunday, YouTube had to slap an age restriction on it. It got killed so bad.
Man, it was that bad, man. It was gory. I mean, the Lee Spring Army went over the trenches, and I mean, hell, apparently it was a violation of the Geneva Convention with how damn good we took out that fundraiser, because YouTube came in and said, whoa, no one could see that, age restricted on the spot. But nevertheless, we are going to be covering the past 48 hours of the news today. And there has been some fairly large news coming out of really the entirety of the front lines of Ukraine, because apparently the Russians are trying to throw as many bodies as possible at Ukrainian forces in the area of Robotyne, trying to stop their advance. And while it appears that at the moment they are actually stopping the advance just a little bit from the Ukrainian forces, at the exact same time, it appears that they're losing a lot of manpower and also a large amount of vehicles in this attempt. But before we get into all of this frontline news, and there is a massive amount of it today from the front lines, I would like to take y'all really quickly around the world and to New York City, because President Zelensky has actually arrived here in the United States of America and is visiting both the United Nations. Not really visiting, he's actually giving a speech there, and we'll be covering that at the very end of the news tonight. And he's also visited some of the Ukrainian soldiers who have been transported to the United States and are receiving medical care and rehabilitation in hospitals in New York City. As this loads, of course, because the internet is doing its thing, we can see him meeting with some soldiers who are currently in hospitals in the city of New York and New York State. And it's wonderful to know that all of these soldiers are being taken care of by the United States. And it's great to also see that Zelensky has come by to drop by and give them a visit and see how they're doing. Something of a welfare check, not a welfare chick, for the most part. Welfare chicks you can find a lot of, but welfare checks, no, not really so much. But nevertheless, wonderful to see that President Zelensky is meeting the soldiers here and making sure that they're being taken care of. Of course, I would move directly on to his speech, but for tonight, that's actually going to serve as President Zelensky Zelensky's speech at the end of the news. So we're actually going to be revisiting that later on in the stream, later on tonight. So if y'all want to hear what Zelensky has said at the United Nations today, make sure to stick around for about an hour and 40 minutes into the stream, because that's when we'll be running his speech, most likely. But moving on from that and on over into Russia, Russia has tried to one-up Zelensky going to the UN summit, and it appears in that attempt, they've actually sent Shoigu to Iran, and he is currently in the capital trying to meet and talk about possible further cooperation in between the Iranians and the Russians for more weapons. Here's the clip of that. And it's something. It's already a clown show at the very start, but here it is. I like how they just put a flag in front of them like it's a damn racetrack. They're like, stop! And they're like, okay, go. Also, anyone else find it interesting that Iran is supposed to be an Islamic republic, but the uniforms of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is supposed to be a whole revolution overthrowing the Shah of Persia and everything like that, they still almost wear the exact same dress uniforms that you would have seen under the Shah's reign in Persia up until about the late 70s. Kind of a little odd, but hey, we can't point out too much about them. Otherwise, the Ayatollah may declare that we need to be executed or something. So we're going to let this keep playing.
محمد باقری رئیس ستاد کل نیروهای مسلح جمهوری اسلامی ایران قرار گرفت. اینجا ستاد کل نیروهای مسلح جمهوری اسلامی ایران. یونس شادلو خبرگزاری صدا و سیما.
That's the end of the clip, but that's largely what happened today at the official state ceremony that, of course, celebrated the arrival of Shoigu in Iran, which is probably the largest thing that's ever happened there since the embassy siege in the late 70s and early 80s. But moving on from that, of course, we know that the Iranians and the Russians are currently in a little bit of a weird bind with each other, because the Russians, from what we understand, may have illegally started to reverse engineer and produce their own version of the Shahed 136 drone, which is a Iranian-produced drone. And so we actually understand that there may be some tough feelings about that from the Iranians against the Russians, but we're not exactly sure, because once again, they have received Shoigu today, and it does appear that they're going to be getting into some little talks, conversations, and discussions about further weapons procurement, so that way the Russians can reverse engineer even more weapons. Really quickly, I'd actually like to take a small note, because this is something that we actually were deliberating today, and some of y'all may have realized that the video that we made yesterday was taken down, and also, well, taken down by us. It wasn't taken down by YouTube or anyone else. And also, there was no video that came out today, and here are the two reasons why. Yesterday's news, from what we understand, the sources may have been a little bit unreliable or may have been incorrect with their information, so we decided to take that video down in the era of making sure that the news is accurate, not just that there is news coming out. We would rather not have a video for y'all to see one day if the news is inaccurate, rather than to put out inaccurate news. It's kind of how this channel runs. We try and get as much accurate news as possible. If we can't, we will pull the video until we can get more correct information. Another reason why...
And also, Enforcer, real quick before you go into your second point, I just want to say, since I made the video yesterday, the reason why I took it down is because the sources that we were getting, and y'all probably heard about the Poland-Ukraine situation, these sources were overhyping the situation. A lot of people jumped the gun and started taking the most extreme position possible, and it turned out it was based on faulty information, and the situation is not nearly as bad as it was made out to be by the sources. So we took it down to make sure that we get all the facts first, because it looks like Ukraine was given a bad rap for some faulty facts.
And another thing, and this is also why a video didn't come out today, is that we were trying to actually span out a little bit into international news for a short moment. I understand that a lot of y'all actually would like for us to go into world news every once in a while, and whenever we have the chance, we try. And we were actually going to be moving into some world news today on the current third Nagorno-Karabakh war that has happened in between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We decided not to do that today because when we looked into the news, it appears as of today that the conflict may already be ending, and it also appears that many people weren't really that interested in the general public about what was happening inside of Azerbaijan and Armenia, although you could kind of expand that into the greater, if you want to call it the Russian world of what's going on around their sphere, or their very, very small and currently deteriorating sphere. Because the Russians, last time the Nagorno-Karabakh war broke out in 2020, actually brokered the peace and sided with Azerbaijan, which was a little odd, because usually they don't. But nevertheless, we were thinking about covering that today, and then we didn't, and by that point, it was so late, we couldn't make a video at all. So that's why we haven't had 2 videos over the past 2 days, but hopefully we will be able to get back to our normal video uploading schedule by tomorrow. Also,
y'all know how bad that hurt me to take down a video that I made for the short war summary. That killed me to have to take that down, but it was worth it because the information, obviously, like I said, was faulty. But man, that killed me. That was a couple hours of work down the drain because of a faulty source.
And I got to tell you, it's incredibly unfortunate to know that we did have to take down a video. But once again, we would rather have accurate news and less of it than inaccurate news and more of it. So if we can try and, of course, correct news wherever possible, we always go and try and do that. That's also why we go and trim down sources sometimes because they may be inaccurate, among other things. We always try and make sure that the news is as accurate as possible. Another thing, I'm seeing some people actually say in the chat that they would like for us to actually cover what's going on in the Nagorno-Karabakh War, or Nagorno-Karabakh War Part 3, or at least the border skirmish happening down there. And we would actually like to get into a lot of stuff, loads of things we would love to get into. And actually, Matthew, if you could, line this up to be the next poll whenever you get the chance. Would y'all like to see our video formats move into world news? Because I'd actually be interested to see if y'all would like that. Of course, we'll have a war summary in those videos, but 7 days a week, we would be able to cover world news of every single kind possible, and maybe even start to delve into those longer length, 15-minute long documentary videos that cover a specific topic in the world and go into some pretty good detail about it. But let us know about that. I would be pretty interested. And with that...
And what's the area called again?
Say what?
Is it Armenia?
Yeah, Armenia, Azerbaijan, but we're really talking about world news all over, just anything in the world.
Okay.
So with that, we're now going to be moving on from this little bit of news in Iran, with Shoigu being there, and we don't know what it will turn into. It appears, actually, that the North Korean meeting didn't evolve into anything, really. It appears that they left they left Russia without any kinds of an actual arms agreement. Once again, the United States is is fairly concerned about it because it may actually help the Russians to find some way to fill their ammunition stores, which are currently depleted at the moment, and have a small trickle of of newly produced ammunition entering the Russian army. But moving on from that and on into Ukraine itself, it is time for us to get into our location unknowns. And starting over with our first clip, we got to see that a Ukrainian driver accidentally crashed an MRAP on film the other day. And I gotta say, I've never heard of a Ukrainian Tony until today. But luckily, no one was injured seriously. I think there were only minor injuries in this clip, and we don't even get to see them. But it was pretty interesting to watch. So here's the clip. We see them driving down the road. We hear an explosion somewhere, and we can see that the MRAP's picking up speed. On a pretty muddy road, the traction's going to be very light on these kinds of conditions. And we can see him lose control and go right into the berm. Oh, Tony Blair! And now we can see them opening up the back door again after getting jostled around a little bit. We hear a mortar explosion in the distance. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But it does appear that there was one Tony in the Ukrainian army, and he was able to drive an MRAP today. Luckily for the Ukrainians, it didn't end up exactly like Tony, where like 10 guys got thrown out onto the street and the MRAP flipped over and then rolled over most of them. But nevertheless, pretty interesting to watch, and good to know that they were able to come out of it with really no injuries rather than just getting thrown around the truck a little bit. But with that, We're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, where we also got to see a Russian officer commissioning beatings. Some of y'all may know that beatings in most militaries of the world historically is actually a little bit of a normal occurrence, at least up until about the past century or so. During Prussian times, they actually had a tradition called running the gauntlet. And this is actually where the saying comes from. It was a form of corporal punishment where a Prussian soldier, Hessian soldier, really it extended to all of the German princely states, not just Prussia. But the soldiers would line up in a line, two separate lines looking both at each other, and you would walk down the middle of it, and they'd either have canes or they would have something else, usually just their fists, and they would hit you as hard as they could as you walk down that line. It was a form of punishment to ensure that soldiers didn't get too out of line or they were punished for their infractions. And there were also other kinds of punishments as well that other militaries did, but we're not going to be going into those too much. We're just going to get that out there, out of the way. But nevertheless, these kinds of punishments disappeared almost entirely around the beginning of the last century, but it appears that in the Russian army, they have come back. Check out this officer conduct that corporal punishment. And Matthew, I gotta say, this guy doesn't look that much like a corporal, but the punishment is certainly punishing. Here's the clip.
Why are they picking on corporals, though? Oh,
I don't
damn.
know.
That dude's whacking him hard.
But this guy just gave him what is literally an ass beating. He's hitting him right on the ass with that giant stick. Look at that. Bop! Bop!
Dang, that dude is taking out frustration on that guy.
Man, he's sitting there. This is for the pay that I haven't gotten in 6 months. Get to the back of the line.
Oh, God.
And now the next guy comes up. He also gets beat. And now you see them moving along. We can see the officer speaking loudly and carrying a big stick. He's trying to do what Teddy Roosevelt said at least a little bit, but I don't really think this guy has got the spirit, but I don't really think he knows what carrying a big stick means. It doesn't mean you go around beating your squad members on the ass with it, but nevertheless, it appears that he's taking some pretty interesting little ideas out of the big stick thing. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from that interesting little clip right there and on into the next one, where we got to see that the Ukrainians have gotten some MRE upgrades. Before I even get into this, I have to say,
Amazon?
I actually, Matthew, it's actually a real Ukrainian MRE, and I hate to say this, but many of y'all have probably heard the rumors about the Ukrainians absconding and embezzling money through the purchasing of eggs at a much higher price to try and figure out a way to just spend money, just really burn money that's given to them by Western governments. And sadly, we saw today that that's actually true. And so I'm going to be showing y'all this clip of what's in this MRE, but y'all might find it shocking. Here's the clip. You see them unpacking it, whipping out the MRE. You see him.
Oh, look, an old Soviet bag of food.
Oh, look, an old green bag. You see their Dnipro MREs. He's asking for the serial number here. It's MRE number 3. Number 3. Keep that in mind, everyone. This is the third menu of this form of MRE. And look at this, y'all. Can y'all believe the insanity of the amount of money that the Ukrainians are spending on these MREs? They packed 2 frozen fish in this thing. 2 frozen fish. Do you know how much that costs the Ukrainian army? $70 for those 2 fish. Insane. And by the way, just in case, because I see some people not picking up on this, and I don't really think I made it clear enough, this is a joke, by the way. This is a fake packaged MRE. This is not a real one. I can actually show y'all a real one if y'all want to see it, but this whole thing is fake. But just putting that out there because I see some people are like, man, the Russians are spreading the BS. No, this is just me joking around, and also the Ukrainians joking around too. But when you see the fish,
man, I didn't really see any ice or anything in there for those fish, unless I missed it.
Well, man, I mean, like, hey, like, if you didn't have ice, man, there's something better to cool them off in. A full-on energy drink.
Oh, that'll wash it down real good.
And a Red Bull.
Cook it in Red Bull.
They say, not bad, not bad. Good start, yes. And he says, oh, look at this. Whips up a bucket, just a conveniently placed bucket, and they're live crawfish.
Oh, come on. This isn't a real MRE. Get out of here.
Yeah, it's not real. It's not real. They did this whole thing as a prank.
Дніпро шара, ёп.
Man, watch him open up the next bag and it's like Mexican Coke.
Cocaine.
The Coca-Cola, that is.
Моє диви, все.
Man,
Все, що треба.
look at this. They packed in spices in the next package.
Дніпро.
Man, I've got to tell you, man, Dnipro knows how to do their job.
Неплохо. Да? Хороший такой. Да.
Look how nice they are. Good caliber. Since when have these been issued? I don't know.
Надо байки открывать.
Let's open more MREs, and of course they laugh in the end. The whole thing's a joke. But the clip ends right there. And this is what is pretty funny about this entire thing, is that it's fake. But, and also, by the way, this person who put it out on Twitter, Alex Bond, they said in their comment section this was a prank. It was a whole prank video. But there were already people in the comment section that were Russian bots sitting there going, look at how Ukraine squanders Western money. They're just squandering billions of dollars in MREs. And it's like, do you really think, like, really quickly, I had to go through and debunk it because while it's a funny joke, some people are going to take this seriously. So I have to go through and actually explain why this doesn't need to be taken seriously. MREs are supposed to be stored for years, and the contents of them are not supposed to expire for years, usually way longer than their expiration date even shows. Do you really think that they're going to be putting live crawfish into an MRE bag and expecting them to be good in 3 to 5 years' time? No. Do you think frozen fish will last 3 to 5 years? No. This whole thing's a prank. But nevertheless, an interesting prank, and one that people are apparently not catching on to too well. But I gotta tell you, Matthew, whenever you sit there, you see a crawfish, you know what some people call them?
Crawdad.
A crawdaddy. But anyways, moving on from that.
All right.
Just moving on from that.
You know, it's kind of weird though. Like this seafood came in like Ukrainian packaging, like it was a real MRE. Did they really go through the trouble of like sealing it up and everything to go that far with the prank?
They did. They went through the whole 9 yards, man. Like they even had it in its original MRE package. Like a Ukrainian MRE. Let me go pull one up off screen. Ukrainian MRE. And let me show you what these look like. You can actually buy them on eBay. I wouldn't suggest doing that because someone out there has stolen this from an army stockpile in Ukraine and they're selling it to you. These are actually supposed to be for the army of Ukraine, not for a random person to buy. It's kind of like how US MREs also show up on the open market, like that one. Like that shouldn't be there technically. I believe somewhere on them they also say property of the US government, not for individual sale. Yet nevertheless they show up everywhere. But a normal Ukrainian MRE does show up in these little green pouches, and you open up the main green pouch, and then inside of it are smaller green pouches with other stuff in it. Usually it's actually stuff like porridges, soups, that kind of stuff that's in them. You're never going to find anything like a fish or a crawdad inside of an MRE, a Ukrainian one at least, because it won't store that long. You know, it's going to store for like a few days, and that's it. These things have to last years inside of storage. So anyways, very interesting to see them pulling off a prank like that. And you know folks are going wild with that info. But nevertheless, while they're going wild with that info, for one of the first times ever today, we got to see a Storm Shadow in flight. Someone actually got a short film. It was about 3 seconds long of the Storm Shadow flying overhead. Here it is. And also, this thing has got a hell of a noise. That's it right there. And man, I got to tell you,
Dang.
that noise is like those cartoon jet noises. It sounds like that.
I think it's pretty fast.
It is. It's pretty fast. I would say that looks like it's maybe like 550 miles an hour, perhaps. Pretty fast for a missile. And on top of that, it's largely stealth. Of course, stealth is a bit of a misnomer. Nothing is truly stealth, not even the F-35. Everything has a cross-section to it. So if your radar is sensitive enough, it will pick it up, but it will most likely pick up literally every single leaf on a tree as well. So then, you know, of course, it's still stealth because a normal radar wouldn't pick that up as anything worth detecting. But nevertheless, really cool to see a Storm Shadow in flight. We don't know where it was going or what its target was, but still really neat nevertheless. Moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also got to see a medical evacuation vehicle on the move as well. And this thing was really neat. It's a small little stretcher kind of vehicle that would carry a wounded Ukrainian soldier across the battlefield and away from danger. The idea of these little tracked stretcher bearers is so that way they can cut down on the amount of stretcher bearer crews needed and also how many people will be in those crews as well. And when you see this thing carrying along this Ukrainian soldier, and we can see that it can actually deal with a wide variety of obstacles. The estimated range of this thing
That looks kind of uncomfortable, I'm not going to lie.
kind of uncomfortable, but it will save the lives of Ukrainian stretcher bearers that otherwise would have to go up there themselves. Oh man, now that is uncomfortable.
Oh, look, it's towing somebody now.
Dude, it turned into a recovery vehicle. It grabs up the Ukrainian soldier. Oh man. But that's the end of the clip. And these are supposed to be saving Ukrainian stretcher bearers from potential danger. Instead of sending a stretcher bearer up there to the wounded soldier, or like 7 guys where they have to pick the one man up and then run him across the field and possibly all get taken out by mortar fire, you could send up this little remote controlled stretcher bearer, or about 2 or 3 guys with it, drop the wounded guy onto it, strap him down, and then remote control it across the field back to the exfiltration vehicle, load him into it, and then have him on his way. And so it's largely supposed to be mitigating casualties in the stretcher bearer units and also making it a lot easier of a job, and it does appear like there is some promise here. Whether we'll see these things used on the front line yet, we're not entirely sure. We can see that they're already in a Ukrainian army unit, but we've never really seen these things on film being used. So keep that in mind. We're not really sure if they will be used, but if they are, hopefully it will be saving the lives of stretcher bearers. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a really cool picture of a MiG-29 inverted over eastern Ukraine. And here's the picture. This is most likely like a MiG-29 S-13. The Ukrainians don't really have a lot of modern MiG-29s. Most of them are older, but we can see the dash of the cockpit right there, and then we can also see him looking at what appears to be the rise of dawn over Ukraine. It appears that the ground's over here to the right side, the sky's up to the left, and the rising sun is out there splitting the picture into two. But an absolutely beautiful picture, and once again, just a really neat thing to look at. And remember that there are pilots flying over the skies of Ukraine right now, making sure to defend the airspace from Russian attacks. The Ukrainian Air Force practically has to be ready 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with aircraft in the air, ready to intercept any Russian missiles that may come their way. Largely, the Ukrainian Air Force does very good at that, and also has the Ukrainian ground air defense units to back them up as well, just in case if any of them make it through. But still, a really cool picture, and once again reminding us of all of those brave pilots, just like the pilot Juice, who of course passed away in a training incident around 2 or 3 weeks ago, who continue to defend the skies of Ukraine and continue to hope for the day that they will not have to fly their aircraft over the territory of Ukraine to defend their nation. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our last bit of Location Unknown news, which is the Russian casualty report. And it was juicy. Boom, baby!
Hey, let's go. They got 2. Let's go.
Hey, and Margaret H put in 2 Bobcats getting bopped. Hey, and wonderful to see.
Let's go.
Love to see the meme. Absolutely beautiful, and wonderful to know that 2 Bobcat skid steers have been destroyed. Not only that, but every other vehicle and every other category was also quite high today as well. 520 Russian soldiers ended up getting the boot over the past 24 hours, to put that in a more creative way. 17 armored personnel carriers were also knocked out. That's about enough to equip 2/3 of a battalion tactical group across the entirety of the front lines, a pretty significant number for a single day. We also saw that 30 supply trucks have been destroyed as well, a very significant number. And while we're getting used to higher supply truck numbers in losses, it is always important to remember that a single supply truck can carry an estimated 8 to 10 tons of cargo, meaning that if a Russian unit is to lose just one of those supply trucks, 8 to 10 potential tons of supplies have also been lost as well, and the ability to carry them. And I know that some people are going to be saying, well, what if the truck's unloaded? I mean, they're obviously losing no supplies if the truck is unloaded, like a Euro 4320. You're absolutely right. But supplies mean nothing if you have no way to get them to the front lines. And this is something, and I have to go through this a great deal, because logistics is something that nobody ever covers at this point in the war. Everyone just kind of thinks of logistics as a background thing. It's not really important, and the war goes on beyond that. Most people look to the fighting soldiers, the guys in the artillery, the guys driving the tanks, and the infantry in the field to keep the war running, the guys who are really important to this whole thing. But I'd actually have to disagree. the guys behind the scenes that are providing those soldiers with ammunition, spare transmissions, and parts to keep the tanks running, refitting the barrels of artillery pieces, and providing ammunition to them, they're actually the ones largely who are more important than the infantry themselves, because you can find infantry. You can't really find great logisticians. Great logisticians are very difficult to come by, and that's something that you would see wreck the Soviet army in the Second World War. And really quickly, let me go to Soviet vehicle production, World War II. Now let me see if I can get you all some numbers here. So let's see. Soviet combat vehicle production. Let me see if I can get that here. Is this 30? Okay, good. Trying to look for trucks. And it doesn't really appear that they have a list for the trucks. Let me see if I can find one for that. Soviet truck production. So let's see. Okay, so here we go. This is the exact stuff I'm looking for right here from History Stack Exchange. At the start of the First World War for the Russians, they only had 270,000 trucks. By the end of the war, they would have received nearly 750,000. 312,000 of those were Lend-Lease. 150,000 of them were domestic production. 221,000 of them were drafted from the industry and agricultural sectors, meaning they just had to grab them from wherever, and 60,000 of them were captured enemy trucks, so captured Opel Blitzes. But as you can see, the number at the end of the war, nearly half of all of the trucks and vehicles being used by the Soviet Union were Lend-Lease trucks from the United States. And what's interesting is that if you go through it, it's a huge historical rabbit hole that a lot of people argue about. It's actually very contentious in the historical world, or the world of history, is that the Soviet Union only started to win once Lend-Lease vehicles started to arrive from the United States, and specifically supply trucks. And a lot of people argue, and I'm also one of those people that argue, that if it wasn't for the United States providing hundreds of thousands of trucks under the Lend-Lease, the Soviet Union possibly wouldn't have won the war like they have. It would have taken them a lot longer, and it would have been a lot bloodier of a conflict if they didn't have the ability to transport a large amount of supplies, which is what we did for them. And of course, you can see that also taking effect in the Gulf War as well, when the U.S. created the Highway of Death leading into Kuwait. The Iraqi army was almost completely cut off from supplies and was almost absolutely destroyed on that highway alone, meaning that once the actual offensive into Iraq began and we raced all the way up to Nasiriyah and Basra, there was really nothing stopping us, and the Iraqi army was already so weakened and supply deficient and attrited, there was really nothing they could do there either. Supplies are the winner of wars, and destroying 30 supply trucks a day is something that is going to have more of an effect on the frontline situation than destroying 10 tanks a day would have. Because while you may not destroy a single tank, if you destroy their ability to get ammunition of any kind, or to even run or have the gas for them to operate, you have practically destroyed that tank in every single way but its mere existence. So it's a very important thing to keep in mind that 30 supply trucks destroyed is probably the most important number that we're getting out of this day. But moving on from that, we also got to see the 5 main battle tanks were destroyed, 35 artillery pieces, 15 drones, 2 MLRSs, 17 cruise missiles were also destroyed and shot down over the past 24 hours, and 1 anti-aircraft missile system was also knocked out as well. Overall, it was an absolutely amazing day for the Ukrainian army in terms of inflicting losses onto the Russians, and hopefully we'll be able to see good days like this going on from here forward. But with that, it's now time for us to move on out of the casualty report right there, and it's now time for us to move on into the front lines themselves, and specifically right down into the area around Robotyne and the entirety of the southern front, where we saw a Russian counterattack attempted but failed almost immediately and miserably once it began. But before we get on into that, there's been a whole bunch of stuff going on out in the world today, and actually yesterday as well. And many of y'all have been talking about it, speaking of it, and seeing it in the news, not just on this channel, but around the entirety of the internet. And so many of y'all have had interesting comments to make, and I was wondering, Matthew, what have people been saying about some of the top topics of the day?
All right, so it's time for our first poll and question segment of the stream. And our first poll says, yesterday a Russian drone was found on Bulgaria's coast, and was it washed up or was it intentional? 43% said it simply washed ashore, 31% said, not enough info yet, 14% said unsure, and 11% said it was intentional and it flew in. And on this one, I gotta say that there really is not enough info yet to determine exactly what happened. Bulgaria is being very quiet as to the details around the circumstances. So it looks like it might have washed up on the shore, but at the same time, it's kind of unclear. But it was definitely a Russian Shahed drone of some sort that washed up. And obviously, Bulgaria is a NATO country, so there is some concern around that. But we don't have enough detail yet. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the drone is probably washed up, much like the country it comes from, because from what I understand, it was found on the beach, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like on the rocks on the beach on the coast.
Yeah, I would probably say it was washed up because the odds of the drone flying specifically into that spot and then gliding in, from what I saw on the video, in such a good and land in such a good state on jagged rocks like that, where it's practically an intact airframe, I would have to say probably washed up ashore. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, and I feel like the case is opened and closed. But nevertheless, it's not open and closed. Everyone could say anything. They could say that it crashed into the shore, it was flown there. I'm having a feeling it washed up there, but hey, even if it did wash up, it's just like the Russians, washed up and ejected. But nevertheless, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and the second poll says, should we expand our coverage to Armenia situation / world news or stick to Ukraine? It looks like 39% said you should stick to Ukraine. 36% said add Armenia conflict in world news. 18% said, I'm not really, but I wouldn't mind. And 7% said unsure. So this one speaks for itself. And Enforcer, what say you?
Very interesting results. It appears that it is a very small split in between including world news and not including world news. One thing I would like to do, and I would like to say though, is that I would like to move on into greater world news topics. For example, the China situation. Some of y'all know about the Chinese-Taiwan situation, or really East Asia as a whole. Maybe even cover specific things from around the world. For example, one interesting video I found today was actually from a YouTube channel called Japanalysis, I believe is how it's pronounced. And they were talking about a scandal with a company called Big Motors in Japan, which was really interesting. And I would love to cover stories like that. I think they're incredibly neat, incredibly interesting. When you get into the nuances of them, you could really sit back and just enjoy listening to that kind of news. At least I can. I don't know about all of y'all, but we wouldn't be covering the Armenia-Azerbaijan situation as the only world news out there. We may even cover other things. For example, the Turkish situation. Turkey has been a subject of great intrigue in the modern world, especially because of how Turkey does Turkey things, like we've always said on this channel. And that would be something I would love to cover as well, and maybe explain to everyone in a 15-minute long mini documentary, why is Turkey, in a very short explanation, doing what it's doing. I think those kinds of topics would be incredibly interesting, at least to put out in video format. The streams will always be about Ukraine every single day, 6 days a week, except for Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We will always be covering the news of the war in Ukraine and picture and video evidence like we always have been. But I would like to see about experimenting with the videos themselves that we run almost every day of the week, and see if we could start to include more varied and also equally interesting topics that all of y'all could sit back and enjoy. Maybe topics y'all don't hear about before. Because one thing's very clear to me. If you listen to mainstream news like Fox News and CNN, among all of those, you largely get the same hash bullcrap every day, at least here in America, and it's all American politics. There's nothing else that the news covers nowadays but American politics. And there's so much interesting flavors of news and stories that they don't pick up on anymore. They don't pick up on things even happening within the United States. Like, for example, agriculture. There's some very interesting things going on within agriculture and other areas that are just very interesting to listen to. Like, I'm sure that many of y'all didn't hear that recently there was rumors of another railroad strike going on here in the United States. And I would find it interesting, of course not covering anything political about it, but explaining the story as to why the railroad workers may be striking and also what the position of the railroad companies are in this situation. Those stories would be very interesting to me to cover. Not, of course, in any kind of a way that breaks our rule about no politics, but in a way that just explains stories around the world and what's going on with them. I think it would just be incredibly neat and unique to do. But, nevertheless, that poll is what it is, and we will have to see whether y'all enjoy that or not once we actually try and put that news and video out there. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll for now, so we're moving into our super chat questions. And up first, we have a very generous $100 donation from guess who?
Hey,
BC
BC
Skyman, the channel
Skyman.
legend. And thank you very much, BC, for that support. And he says, do you think Zelensky's speech to the UN will unite the world against Russia? And will Russia be kicked out of the UN? And awesome job, enforcers, and slow Ukraine.
And
thanks for the kind words, BC.
And thank you so much for the kind words, BC Sky. Sorry for interrupting you again, Matthew. It's very hard because I'm always afraid that there's going to be some kind of a lag. So I'm like, I need to start talking right when he's almost done, so that way it's a perfect transition, and then there's no lag, and then I just end up over talking you. But still, thank you so much for saying we're doing an awesome job. We try our best, we really do. And actually, interestingly enough, today, just in case if y'all are wondering, how full steam are they going? I guess that's the best way I could say it. How full energy are they going? We were going so full energy with this that I actually ended up sleeping in today and missing a couple of classes of law school because, honestly, I try and keep this on the down low. I'm honestly energy spent for the most part, so I'm trying to make sure to pace myself, keep everything going, and make sure that we can have our cake and eat it, like we always say. So I got to thank you so much for appreciating the awesome job.
Man, I was sleeping out today. I actually went to class and I just kind of slept through it all, it felt like. So I guess you slept in and I slept out.
Man, oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. I was sleeping in and he was sleeping out. Oh man. But anyways, thank you so much for saying we're doing an awesome job, because we are trying our darndest to keep everything running, both law school and this, and your support helps us to try and keep everything running, at least as much as we physically can. But I would have to say, to answer your question, I got to thank you so much once again for asking a good one. And and while I'm saying that, I'm actually trying to filibuster to get a good answer for this. Zelensky doesn't really have to try and unite most of the world against Russia, because the sides have very truly formed at this point. They're solidified. The countries that support Russia will support Russia. The countries that are neutral will remain neutral for the most part. And the countries that are anti-Russian or pro-Ukrainian are pro-Ukrainian. I believe his speech was more so to reiterate that point, and also to try and once again remind the world of what the war is to the Ukrainian people. And I think in that sense, it did pretty good from what I could see earlier. He largely covered the points of what the Russians have been doing against the citizens, the kidnapping of children, the genocide of Ukrainian culture in occupied territories. For the most part, it was a pretty good speech. Sadly, it will never remove the Russians from the United Nations. The United Nations is a very weirdly organized organization. It's very odd. Because back when it was made during the beginning of the Cold War, and at that time, the United States and the Soviet Union were already getting to the point of hating each other's guts and wanting to nuke each other into oblivion. And so when the United Nations was made, largely being spearheaded by the United States, the Soviet Union was very apprehensive about joining the United Nations, and said, what's to say, considering that there will be more Western-aligned countries than Soviet-aligned countries, that we wouldn't just be kicked out or just get steamrolled in every single decision-making process. And so a compromise was made, and we said to the Soviet Union, if you join, we're going to create this thing called a Security Council, which will have 5 permanent members. There will be no way to remove these 5 permanent members, and every single time the UN actually makes a decision or has to take an action, it will be put up to a vote by the Security Council, and only one of those members of the Security Council has to veto the decision for it to not go through. So unlike most democratic organizations where there's a voting process and it's a majority rules kind of situation, with NATO, it's actually not that way. It's actually the minority rules situation where a single group can veto a decision and it will not go through. And that's why we'll never see the Russian Federation or China kicked out of the UN for any reason, is because both of them are members of the Security Council, and if that vote ever comes up to the Security Council, it's largely dead before it even arrives, because those members will always veto that decision, and they always will remain within that Security Council. So there really is no way to remove the Russians, unfortunately, although so many people want that to be the case, and honestly at this point I think it should be the case. But sadly, there is just no way to do it because of the weird structure of the United Nations. And if you want to thank anyone, you can thank the diplomats from the Soviet and American side who made that the case way back when the United Nations was founded back in 1949. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the mass amount of support, BC Scam, and I hope that does address both of them fairly well. And Slava Ukraini! And thank you so much once again for the mass amount of support, and I hope I was able to answer those questions fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next super chat goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in an $80 donation, and thank you very much as well, Margaret, for that very generous support. And she says, in honor of my granddaughter Arabella's first birthday, and may she grow up in a world of peace, put us towards spiffy suits, 'cause as lawyers you'll probably need to spend plenty, and 'tis manners, not money, that maketh man. And you are both amazing, and also amazing humans. That part was cut off at the bottom, but thank you very much, Margaret, for the very fine and kind words there. And the spiffy suits are quite expensive, and as y'all know, I'm quite fond of my suit. So thank you very much for contributing to the suit fund. And also, 'tis manners, not money, that maketh man. And Forster, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much once again for the support, Margaret, and helping the channel to keep on running. And also, happy birthday to your granddaughter Arabelle, who just turned 1 today. And I hope that she's having a great birthday. She probably won't even remember it. I don't even remember my first birthday, but I hope she has a great one nevertheless. And I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping us to keep this thing running. Spiffy suits do cost a good bit. Good threads are expensive. And that's one thing that we always have to keep in mind. To be honest with y'all, I have one suit. And it's the same suit I've had for about 3 to 4 years at this point. So I could probably use a new suit, but that one hasn't worn out, and I'm always into the idea of using something until it's broke. Sometimes they end up getting broke, and then I still don't fix them. They just keep on going, because I'm actually a bit of a miser that way. But still, thank you so much for the support and helping us with a suits fund. We will be trying to look spiffy and look our finest, most likely for court dates. You know what I mean, Matthew?
Oh, yeah, man. Gotta be ready for those court dates. I'm telling you.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Margaret. I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the kind words and helping this channel to keep on running. I haven't actually said this tonight, so I'm going to have to say it. It's like someone saying that they're not a YouTuber for 5 minutes, and I pretty much tell everyone I'm a YouTuber every 5 minutes or so when in public, because it's the only thing I do, and it's pretty much my whole entire life at this point. But y'all's support helps this channel to keep on running, and I cannot say that enough. Y'all are the only way we're able to keep the lights on, to pay the bills, and keep everything going. And thanks to y'all support, like yours, BC Skyman and Margaret Hemsley, we are able to keep this channel running. We thank everyone who supports the channel, whether it be $1 or $500. Every single bit counts in helping us to support ourselves and keep this thing rolling, and we thank y'all so much for each and every bit of support. It means a lot to us, because having worked at several jobs before I actually became a YouTuber, I actually know how much it does take to earn $1. It takes a good amount of time. An hour for me was $8.44 at my lowest paying job and $12.50 at my highest paying job. And I realize how much that means to earn $1. And we're highly honored to know that some of y'all find this channel to be worthwhile, that y'all would support us with y'all's hard-earned dollars to help us to make this an actual job. And so thank you so much to every single one of y'all once again for supporting this, because we are greatly appreciative to each and every one of y'all. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. We are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the frontline news.
And this one goes to Blue Flam 777 LSA, who puts in a very generous $70 donation as well. And thank you very much, Blue Flam, for that support. He says, Shy secretly has a crush on Elon, Niner, and Poopler. She no love you. Send to chat. What is going on with that?
Oh, man. And I got to thank you for the support, Blue Flam 777. I don't know what you've got up with Shy, but you keep, I think that's the 3rd time that's been said at this point. I want to know what's going on with this. I have absolutely no idea. But still, thank you so much for the support, Blue Flam 777, and keeping the channel running. And I guess she don't love you. I guess she doesn't love Putin. I don't think anyone likes Putin at this point. He's probably the most hated person in the world. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Blue Flam 777, and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, Matthew, did I hear the murmurs or the rumor of a live chat?
You sent to the chat. Yes.
All right, well, let's get it.
All right, and the live chat question is going to go to Daniel Russell, who says, why don't, this is very southernly written, why don't NATO kick Hungarian president out NATO?
Well, that's a good question. I think because there isn't a way to kick members out of NATO. I think once you join, there is no way to remove a NATO member, and I don't think a NATO member has ever left the alliance. Let me actually pull that up really quickly. Has anyone ever left NATO? As of 2023, no member states have rescinded their membership, although it has been considered by several countries. Notwithstanding, a number of former dependencies of NATO members have never applied for membership subsequent to their becoming independent states. So the answer to that is that we don't really know. Nobody has ever been kicked out of NATO. Nobody has ever even left NATO on their own accord. Once you join, you really never leave. So to answer your question, based off of the precedent that's been laid out so far, there actually is no way to kick Hungary out. And also, I would have to say, regardless of whether people disagree with Hungary's president or not, I would not be into the idea of NATO deposing a president of a democratically elected president of a nation. At that point, we largely become the Russians or the Soviet Union, just going around and deposing whoever we don't like. And I know that some people are about to say we've done that in the past, and you would be somewhat right. But we usually do that against our enemies. For example, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Empire of Japan, not really Korea, but nevertheless, we've never really done that to a nation that could be considered our ally. And considering while Hungary has positions that are usually against other NATO members, and that's very clear at the moment, and they're strongly disagreed with, I still don't think it would be a good idea to just go in and then depose a president. Because how would anyone like that if the entire NATO alliance just walked into your country one day and just said, you know what, we're going to depose your president because we don't really agree with what they're saying? I feel like that largely goes against democracy for the most part, and also the will of the Hungarian people. I mean, you have to remember that this guy was actually elected president by the people of Hungary. And so while we may disagree with his statements, he is still a democratically elected president. And what are we going to say? We know more than the Hungarian people do about who they want to be president, and we may disagree with them, but I wouldn't want to go that far and say that. That seems very undemocratic. But with that, I hope that does address that further well, at least in my opinion. And also, really quickly, someone said Orban is in power for life. So let me check that out. Orban, president for life.
I don't think so.
Let's see. Are there term limits in Hungary? Elects the president for a term of 5 years. Presidents have a term limit of... Well, actually, elects the president for a term of 5... Presidents have a term limit of 2 terms of office. And I think that might be for life, I believe. But let me check. So let's see here. He was the prime minister, and then he became the president. And he's been in office... Hang on, let me... Man, he's held a lot of government positions, actually. So let me see if I can go through and find the actual president of Hungary. Hungarian politician, prime minister. He has president over Fidesz. Man, this is... damn, dude. He's got, like, literally a book written about him on Wikipedia. It's hard to go through and even find the specific info I'm looking for. But nevertheless, from what I can tell, it doesn't seem like anyone's saying he's a president for life. It seems as though everyone's saying that he is just kind of, there. Just people keep on voting him in. And everyone's saying...
Orban is the prime minister, I believe, right?
Yes, he's actually the prime minister, not the president.
Yeah, so Parliament picks him. So, I'm not even going to get into like how that works in like preciseness because I'm not really sure. But the people elect the representatives, and then the representatives elect or pick the prime minister.
Yeah, the members of parliament pick the prime minister. But some people are saying some very interesting things. And a lot of people are saying, oh, I wish we could overthrow this and that president. You'll have to remember that in a democracy, just because you disagree with someone doesn't mean that we throw democracy out of the window and then just go and start overthrowing people because you disagree with them. That's no democracy. That's just a dictatorship with the guise of a democracy. The guy, I will have to say, I don't really agree with him whatsoever on his stances on Ukraine. They've been very odd, they've been very weird, and of course have gone against the grain in NATO, and largely go against NATO's strategic interests. However, considering that he is the prime minister of Hungary, and the prime minister is picked by the elected representatives of the Hungarian parliament, as is parliamentary structures and how they work, it would be very undemocratic to go in and have him removed. It would be very similar to going in to the United Kingdom right now, the entire NATO alliance, and deposing the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom because they disagree with him. It would also be like having the President of the United States deposed because people disagree with him. Regardless whether you agree with these people or not on their political positions, that's beside the point. We're largely looking at how the process of a democracy works, whether it be parliamentary, representative, republic, a federal republic, anything like that. It's largely about the way the thing works. And whenever you see someone that you disagree with, you just have to go, well, I don't really agree with them. When the next election cycle comes around, I'm going to vote for the president, specifically the United States, that I agree with. Or in Hungary, you go, I'm going to elect a member of parliament that's a part of a different party that will hopefully hold a snap election to show that there is a vote of no confidence for the current prime minister, and then they'll bring in a prime minister of their own. That's largely how I would look at it, because that's how democracies are supposed to work. And I know that a lot of people in the modern world have gotten into the concept of if you disagree with someone, damn democracy, just overthrow them and install a dictatorship. But that's not how a democracy is supposed to work. You're supposed to wait until the next election cycle and then just find a way to have them voted out. So, with that...
I got to say, though, like the parliamentary structure is a little bit odd. I'm not going to pretend like I know all the ins and outs of it because I'm not familiar with it completely. But it's kind of weird, though, how you elect representatives and then they pick the prime minister where most of the power is held. And then you also have a president, I believe, as well. So it's just kind of odd how that works.
Well, in some countries, you don't have a president. I don't know what it is with some of the countries that have prime ministers and presidents. I don't even really know how that works. I guess the prime minister fills the role of the Speaker of the House at that point. Although I
think the PM is pretty much the center of power and the president's like the spokesperson.
I really don't know how it works, to be honest with you, because I know in America, we elect the president, who's the head of the executive, and then you can go and elect your senators and representatives. Believe it or not, back in the day, about 100 years ago, you didn't elect your senators. Your governor actually appointed senators. But nowadays, we elect both of them, and that's how our legislative is constructed. But I don't know how the hell that really works in a country that has a president and a parliament, and then has a parliamentary structure where they elect a prime minister. All that is really interesting. I'm going to have to look into it, actually, because I don't actually know how that works exactly. But we'll look into it in a bit, maybe try and figure out an answer to that, but it's not really that pressing. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from this question segment. I hope we answered that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we're moving on into the front lines and right down into where the main action was today near Robotyne. Over the past 48 hours, and let me refresh this map because it hadn't actually updated before the stream, and it still hasn't updated, but over the past 24 hours that we have in this area, the Ukrainian front line has not moved an inch. This is something that is quite interesting, actually, because the Ukrainians have been making forward movement nearly daily up until these past few days. And this is because the Russians are throwing everything they have and expendable abilities and manpower at the Ukrainians to try and stop this advance. Well, I'm assuming that this is most likely a delaying attempt to stop the Ukrainian advance from rolling on down to Tokmak before its time. If the Russians can hold the Ukrainian offensive back for about another month and a half, the Rasputitsa will arrive and the Ukrainian offensive will most likely stall just due to weather alone. Also, the Russians are currently trying to strengthen the defensive positions surrounding Tokmak, and if the Russians are able to throw all of their abilities at the Ukrainians right now and hold them back for that month and a half until the Rasputitsa arrives, even if those Russian units are completely depleted as actual fighting forces, the 58th Combined Arms Army may have a chance of holding Tokmak if the Ukrainian forces make it there by the time the ground once again solidifies in the dead winter around December. So going off of this, it appears that the Russians are trying a Hail Mary to stop Ukrainian forces from pushing forward, and it appears that it is working at least for the while, but we don't know how long they'll be able to hold it up, because the VDV is taking significant losses in this area. The other motorized rifle brigades also appear to be taking significant losses as well, and that was spotted today on film as the 47th Brigade did manage to eke forward a small amount, take a Russian position. The counterattack came along, and they were able to stop it dead in its tracks, and so here's the clip. When we hear the battlefield music playing at the start, and when you see the soldier moving through the brush, when you see some surrendered Russians right here,
Ноги ширше, другий.
На затылок, блядь. Руки сплести, руки сплести.
Грунт.
А.
Давай сюди, ближче під грунт. Сюди під низ хай не тягне. Сюди ближче один тягне, це третій. Тягни сюди.
Вставай.
Лізеш. Повзеш, руки впереді, повзеш.
Вперед. На зв'язку.
Нікому нічого не обіцяв. Ставиш. Потім. Залишатись. Третій.
Плюс. Затаскивай в эту хуйню.
You
Вниз
see the
ходи.
soldiers talking to each other as they're processing these Russian
Ходи
prisoners.
с траншеи туда его вниз, в яму. Давай. Сколько вас? Сколько? Сколько вас шло? Людей?
Сейчас 6 пришло
Де ще троє?
сзади.
Так, быстро в яму пошел. Пополз.
We now see the Ukrainian soldier grabbing the Russian,
Еще трое идут.
and it appears he's going to be moving them through the thicket and back to the area where they'll be
Еще
processed.
трое идут.
We now see the
трое
Russian
идут.
crawling away.
Я знаю. Туда, в яму всех. Снимаем шлемы, разгрузки, блядь, это самое. Все снимаем. Все снимаем. Только осторожно. Как подразделение называется? Подразделение, как называется?
We see them continuing to process the Russians.
92? Да. Это что, морская пехота? Да. Вы... На, пей. Пей.
Реально пейте, все нормально.
Значит, слушай меня, этот самый. Встань, не стой на коленях, стой просто руки. Стой так вот, да, не унижайся. Ну, спокойно, по одному, короче, без глупости, короче. Там найдем тоже место, будем там сидеть до вечера, вечером поедете с нами, короче, все. Мы вас свяжем, короче, но никто над вами издеваться не будет, никто вас пытать не будет, никто вас бить не будет.
We see them talking to the Russians, continuing to process them, asking them information about where they are, what unit they're in, where they came from.
Это сейчас его накрыло или раньше?
Вчера утром, причем
Бери.
причем наши накрыли.
Какой?
They have some other Russian prisoners in this area, and also, Maddie, I think you'll really like this. Oh, I think that's actually a Scar Light right there.
It looks like it. It's got the stock. Although something about it looks a little bit weird, but I think it's a Scar.
I bet you it's probably one of those Bren guns, you know, the Bren 5.
Yeah.
It's probably something like that, but it looks like a Scar.
Could be a Scar F, Scar fake.
Давайте их на другой подвал.
It said Scar Bolex.
Все по схеме.
Now they're taking the Russians further back.
Стопэ. Залазим.
And one thing that tells us that this is a new position that's been taken up is notice how intact this tree line is. It hasn't been absolutely shattered from months of fighting and artillery barrages. So this shows that this position is relatively new, and the 47th Brigade just moved into it, and the fighting has hardly even reached here before over the past few months of the war.
Старлей, давай. Заходь.
We now see another Ukrainian soldier coming up to this cameraman.
Залазь, располагайся там как можешь, удобнее. Залазь. Не, здесь трое может сесть. Так, Старлей, ты чуешь? Пропусти. Туда, вниз, давай. Пропусти. Давай. Располагайся там, короче. Один, второй, третий. Садись там вниз, поговорим трохи. Пообщаемся. Да, давай.
Also, I'm getting some warnings from some folks saying that apparently there's something in the video that could potentially get us in trouble. I'm not sure what though.
And really quickly, I'll take it off screen and I'll give it a little quick censor check. And let's see here.
I've heard from some folks like Steven in the live chat that YouTube's getting a little bit religious with the censoring going on. I'm not sure if that's like a new thing they're doing or what.
They're getting a little tough with it, but we're gonna play this through. I just took a look at it. Doesn't look like there's anything extremely graphic here. If we do get age restricted, though, we may have to change how we cover the news. But for now, we're gonna keep it going like we have.
78-й полк, это что такое?
52-й.
52-й, это что? Чистые момики. Ну, мотострелки, что? Пехота. Яка місто?
Место?
Блядь, не, сейчас скажу.
Still talking to each other. They pushed the Russians into this little bunker here.
Откуда мы сами?
Откуда, да?
Ну, мы с Ставропольского края.
Ставропольский край, да?
Да. Ну, Ставропольский край много откуда. Ну, чисто Ставропольский край.
Место постоянной дислокации?
Нету.
Нема, бомжи, понятно.
Да.
Чего? Сейчас тебе покажу карту. Ты мне покажешь, где ты стоишь, где твои люди.
Смотри, мне первоначально я заходил 19 человек.
Угу.
We're continuing to talk to the Russians in the bunker, asking them more questions, trying to get more information from them.
У меня сначала. Так, самый первый у меня ушел, не вернулся. Потом ушло еще двое.
Wonder what they're saying.
I wonder. I wish I could speak the language. Someone's about to say, get a translator.
Потом мы получили 300-го. 15. Ну, мы его вот с собой тащили, он у нас за 200-ился. 15. Теперь 15 мы вышли вот на ту позицию. И потом у меня начал народ кучками потихоньку съебываться.
Ты что, раненый?
Я, да.
Да. Помочь нужна?
Да нет, уже они затянулись осколки. Я хуй знает, есть там осколки, нету, блядь, какую уже. Уже затянулись, я уже даже...
Кровоточишь? У нас доктор есть. Кровоточишь?
You hear them continuing to talk to him?
Покажи, давай, показывай. Вылазь наверх, доктор, посмотри его. Сядь тут.
Нога, у меня приход сюда, под колено и в жопу.
Садись, садись.
Да, снимай штаны, чтобы я не резал. Смотри, показывай.
Вот.
We now see another Ukrainian soldier going off into the brush further down.
Какой? Сразу про обмен, блядь. Вы только в плен уже про обмен задумали.
Чтобы знать, 3-4 месяца.
Мы этим не занимаемся, короче. У нас тоже воды мало, мы сами делимся. На здоровье, блядь, сука. Ваш дед меня чуть, блядь, на тот свет не отправил, блядь. Моя, блядь, жена узнает, чем тут занимаюсь, короче. С вами, блядь. У меня инфаркт случится, блядь.
And that's the end of the clip, but showing a little bit of what the 47th Brigade had been doing in the area. And great to see they were able to move forward, deal with the Russian counterattack, and hold the position. Of course, this is not really actually representative of most of the frontline situation. From what we understand, even on our end, outside of Deep State UA, it does appear that no frontline advances of any meaningful size are occurring in this area due to Russian counterattacks. And so while they were able to advance in a small form in that area of the line, they haven't really been able to do it anywhere else. We did see a clip, however, the Ukrainians getting a direct hit on a BMP with an M109, which was really nice. Check it out. When you see the BMP right there, and you see the M109 firing right here, and then we're about to see the BMP get blown to pieces right there. Wow. Буф, чага-чага, блядь. Сука, блядь. Пиздики ты нахуй, блядь. Хорошо. But anyways, wonderful to see that another little BMP was taken out. And moving on over into the area of Vasilivka, we also got to see that the Ukrainians destroyed a Russian checkpoint in this area. While the Ukrainians can't really make forward advances at this moment due to frontline difficulties, they are still trying to knock out as much Russian equipment and as much Russian manpower as physically possible to make sure that when the advance can continue, they're dealing with a lot less in terms of Russian forces. We're going to be muting that, but here's their checkpoint. When you see it's some kind of a cardboard box set up in the middle of the street. Kind of looks like the middle of Portland, Oregon, but, you know, beyond that, not bad. We can see the drone coming on in and hitting right on the outpost. Now it appears to be downtown Detroit. We can now see some Russians running out, trying to figure out what's going on, and we can see Scooby and the gang pull up and go, like, Zoink Scoop, this guy almost turned into a ghost. Row, Raggy, that's a casualty 200.
Uh-oh. And they got the boogeyman coming in.
Uh-oh. And they're all running.
Oh.
And then the drone goes, psych.
Oh.
Ooh.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that was fast. That was sped up.
Yeah, that was fast forwarded, yeah.
Oh, that scared me for a minute.
And now he's, oh my lord, Scooby went, like, Zoink Scoop, we gotta get the hell out of here. Row, Raggy, hit the fourth gear. Yeah, oh my lord.
Damn. They sped that footage up, like, right at the right moment to make it look like they flew off.
Oh yeah, they did. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But when you see that their little outpost in the area ended up getting smacked pretty freaking good, that's really the only way I can put it. Anyways, we got to see a long-distance HIMARS shot today on film. It was actually really pretty looking, so check it out. I bet y'all like it. Y'all will appreciate this. So take a look. There's the HIMARS firing out there. And that's what it sounds like from about 1.5 miles away. That's exactly the sound I made the first time I saw this video. I went, ooh. Man, this guy
sounds like some redneck in Alabama, like shooting a shotgun just out in the middle of the woods or something. It doesn't sound like a big piece of equipment.
No, it doesn't. We got to hear this whole thing again because that guy at the end just made it. Oh man, dude, I love it. I love it when we hear little sounds like that at the end of clips where folks are laughing or, you know, pretty impressed with it. Because it is a really impressive weapon system. No one can lie. And have y'all noticed that I've started to corporatize my speech throughout the war? I really hate it because I'm starting to say artillery system and crap like that. At the beginning of the war, I used to not say that. I used to say something like guns, missile launchers, something like that. Now I'm starting to say crap like artillery system. It's starting to bleed off on me. Next thing you know, I'm going to start calling everything tactical, like this tactical camera they used to film this tactical situation. But anyways, but moving on from that, and on towards the area of Staromanivka, we didn't get any videos today from the frontline situation there, but we did get well behind the lines a video of a 2S1 being hit by an SPG. Well, it actually got counter-batteried, and then the crew ran away. We're going to be muting the Pirates of the Caribbean music, but nevertheless, you can see, arg, my boy, our SPG's been hit, and we got to bail out, forget putting it in neutral, hop off the damn boat. And when you see them all hopping off and running
they put this thing in autopilot up to F-35, like it's just going.
Man, look at that. If you see a burning SPG driving through your town, call this number and let us know. And dude, this
Man, what does that thing got, like napalm or something? How's it sticking to the ground like that?
Dude, it's turned into Hell Rider. Look at it. It's leaving a fire streak. And now you can see the next drone coming in. Oh no. It looks like he's going to get the finishing shot. Boop. Right onto the back of the turret. I think that's right where the ammo is stored. Nope, maybe not. Oh, well, yeah, actually it was. There's nothing left of it now. Also,
did y'all literally burnt that thing to the ground?
Did y'all notice that this actually hit the berm behind the anti-tank ditch on the Surovikin line? That's where it was. It's around there in that area of the front line. But as you can tell, it's gone. Not really a lot to say. You can see that it's gone. Half of it doesn't even exist anymore. Beautiful to see, and what a hit. Moving on from that and well behind the lines, we also got to see a Bakhtir, a new anti-drone shield that's being tested out by the 32nd Brigade, which is very interesting to see. So here's the clip. I'm scared. Oh yeah, we're muting that. Where you see them whipping it out. And this little thing here serves as a shield. You set it up somewhere, you turn it on, and it should interrupt the signals of drones where they can't fly.
That's actually a better design than the drone gun. That looks more easy to handle.
Yeah, it does. That drone gun was massive and clunky. But really nice to see that you've set up a new form of anti-drone equipment that hopefully will be easier and more ergonomic to use. Moving on from that and out of the southern front, we're now going to be moving on into the northeast because things have been going on in the northeast that are very interesting. We got to see the 109th Brigade hit the Russians with some artillery. It was pretty accurate. Of course, y'all know. The Ukrainians are not really inaccurate with their artillery.
But they have the crow, bliat.
Man, we can see them getting slammed, getting hit, getting smacked around a little.
What'd that guy say at the Clown Motel? I'm gonna come down there and knock you around a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I want to put... Oh, yeah, hang on. Oh, yeah, you think you're a tough guy? I ought to come down there and knock you around a little. But listen, man, I don't want you at my motel. I don't want you at my motel. You don't really sound sane. Oh, yeah? Well, why don't I come down there and knock you around a little bit? Listen here, you bastard. And he just went off on the guy. Oh, man. But when you see the 109th hitting everything, big and small. And I gotta tell you, they're getting really effective with the drone bombs at this point in the war. Like, they are able to eyeball it well. I mean, hell, they're even giving Palmetto State Armory a run for their money, eyeballing it. I mean, hell, I think they're doing even better than them. I'm just kidding, by the way. Palmetto State Armory isn't that bad. But we can see them continuing to drop bomblets pretty effectively. And look at it. I mean, it's some pretty good stuff. We can see them dropping another, hitting right onto the bunker entrance. Hitting some APCs. Hitting some infantry, hitting some trenches, hitting a little crater here and there, hitting another bunker, hitting another APC, hitting another bunker, and a crater. You got to get those craters every once in a while. It just matters. Hitting more trenches, this time in green, beautiful fields, hitting Russians as they run. Hitting Russians while they're in a squad on the move through a village. Right there. Look at that. Pretty accurate, I gotta admit. Hitting them in the tree lines. We see the artillery hitting here, hither and thither. Wonderful to see. And you see the fire burning right over there on a little Russian position. Once again, making sure that the eggs are cooked well. Or Russians are cooked well. Either way. I mean, you know, to serve man, it's not a book, it's a cookbook.
Oh, it's a cookbook. It's a cookbook.
That is, they're loading folks up. Man, they's eating. But anyways, that's the end of the little clip right there. And of course, absolutely wonderful to see the 109th Brigade was able to inflict some significant losses on the Russian forces with their drones. Moving on from that and down into the area, of course, of Zalaman. We got another clip from there of a BMP getting hit.
How do you say that name?
Zalaman.
And what's it say down there below the drone symbol?
It says, Zhuang. Man, that's like feng shui, man. I'd be feeling that zung shui kind of way, you know?
All right.
But anyways, when you see the BMP getting hit by a drone, and it's out of control, it's coming to a stop, and the crew's probably bailing out as it's rolling, and they are. There they go. Hopping off the sides and leaving. The second drone comes in to take it on out.
Is Escadrone, is that, what's his name? Madyar's, like, drone unit, or is that somebody else's?
I think it's someone else's, because Madyar's unit's operating kind of in the Volodar area right now, but this is in the northeast.
It's like Escadrone's doing most of the drone strikes these days, or at least the ones that are being uploaded to YouTube.
Well, no, Madyar is actually doing a lot of strikes. I actually would have to correct that there. Problem is, we can't show the videos on stream because they're usually 20 minutes long. So we usually have to cut those out because we wouldn't have time to show the video. But nevertheless, Madyar is out there, and he's still repping the set. It's just that the videos are so long, we wouldn't really be able to show them on stream. But with that, moving on from that clip and on into the next one, in the area of Kremenna, and specifically Dubrova, we also got to see a Russian Ural getting hit in this area as well. And I guess you could say that that the Russians' Urals were not happy today at all. Here's a clip. I was trying to figure out a way to make a pun there. Didn't work. But we can see the Ural on the move. With the doors open, it seems. Nope, the doors are actually closed. We see it kind of moving around, just taking a little drive, you know, just doing its fun things. It enjoys what it's doing. And trying to pull into that tree line right there, or around in the circle, can't really tell. But we can see them loading up the anti-everything drone with an RPG head. And now the drone is at nearly 2.3 thousand meters, which is freaking insane. That's like 7,000 feet up. And we can see the Ural right there, and we can see the drone coming in, hitting at the front of the Ural, setting the fuel tanks on fire, and burning the truck on down. And also burning the field on down, too. Wow, that thing is toasting.
It's boiling.
Man, I gotta tell you, the Russians make better toasters than most people nowadays. But with that, Wonderful to see that they were able to knock out a 43-20 in that area. And moving on from that, now the Kremenna direction, is now time for us to move on down into Bakhmut. Because we've seen some very interesting things today in the southern flank. And I'm actually going to move down there first. We'll return to the northern flank stuff here in a minute. But from what we've heard, and from what we've seen, we understand that the Ukrainians are in Klishkivka. However, there was a picture that came out today that was geolocated to a specific area that makes me beg the question, have the Ukrainians already moved forward well beyond Klishkivka, and we just haven't gotten the information on that? Because, as you all know, the front line currently exists in a very odd way, especially for the Russian forces. They're in a very difficult situation because of how the front lines exist right now. With the Ukrainians controlling Klishkivka and Andriivka, the Russians are mostly going to be setting up their main anchor points for the next defensive positions at Opitne and Odradivka, thinking that the further away you get from those villages, the weaker their defensive positions will be. Problem is, however, is that a picture came out, and this is the one I'm talking about, of a massive incendiary barrage, white phosphorus, being fired on not Klishkivka or Andriivka, but on Opitne by the Russians, not the Ukrainians. And as you all know, the Russians usually use incendiaries against the Ukrainian army whenever their advances are getting a little too strong, so that way they can hopefully try and slow them down by burning them. But the problem is that no Ukrainian forces, from what we understand, are in Opitne. So unless if the Ukrainians have advanced rapidly and have somehow taken Opitne overnight, and nobody's reporting on that, or the Russians are firing onto Opitne and onto their own forces, or the third option is that that marker was incorrectly located in the caption. I don't really know. It's an interesting video. Maybe they've taken Opitne by now. I'm doubting it heavily. Maybe that marker is wrong in its location, but it was a very interesting marker. Very odd to see that it was located at Opitne, so we're going to be taking that for what it is, and we're going to be kind of holding off on it. Just wanted to show you all the clip, though, and have that geolocated. But moving on behind that and towards Vesela Dolnia, we did get to see that the Russians lost a T-90M in that area of the front line. And so here is the clip. And we're going to be muting that. But we can see the Ukrainians on the move. Of course, this was filmed by the Azov unit. We can see the drone taking off. We can see the FPV pilot getting ready to do his thing. We can see the T-90 right there. We can see the T-90 getting hit. And we can see it burning up. Shaw this chili you cooked up is too damn good. I'm burning up. But anyways, we can see the T-90 exploding. And the massive ball of flame as the fire reached the ammo stowage. And that T-90 is as good as gone. Look at that thing. We now see the Ukrainians hopping in. Man, this is about as quick as we hopped in after filming with that thing near that, you know, that place, man, way back in the day.
Yeah, like at you trying to watch out on the wordage.
Yeah, because I was like, if I word that the right way or the wrong way, we may have folks coming to knock on our door and say, hey, what do y'all mean by that? You know, like, I'd be a little scared. But anyways, moving on from that, great to see they were able to knock out another T-90. And moving on into the town of Klishkivka, we also got to see that the Ukrainians have been, well, captured Russians during their taking of the town of Klishkivka a few days ago, but the footage just came out today. So here's the clip.
А саме зачистки останньої вулиці, там 3...
We hear the epic music in the background, epic action music, and we see them moving through the ruins of Klishkivka, confirming that the village is taken. We can see them interviewing one of the Ukrainian soldiers. His name is Shilo. Or Shiloh. I have a feeling that's probably how it's supposed to be pronounced. We see him chit-chatting a little bit with the cameraman. And we now see the captured Russians down here in the basement. They got the red light and the green light out, confusing the hell out of this guy. He doesn't know whether to go or stop, but it appears that he's decided to stop.
Was that the Cadaverite?
I believe so.
Oh yeah, when they found him, he was going, Dawn, Dawn, hit it, Dawn.
My kidneys are not working at dawn.
Kind of like the fake Sarek in Star Trek did. Spock, help me, Spock.
That is no Vulcan. A Vulcan wouldn't cry out like that. But man, I love that rock creature at the beginning of that episode, because it threw out the gang sign. It said, "You're here to watch the spectacle," and then it threw out that gang sign while it said it.
did.
Man, I respected the rock creature after that. Man, that was funny. But anyways, that's the end of that clip. Great to see them taking a prisoner, and moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see more videos of the liberation of Klishkivka.
I see folks like the Star Trek reference. Had to add that one in. I don't know why that came to mind, but for some reason it did.
We're muting that. But we can see it moving forward. And if y'all want references, we got lots of references, specifically to Star Trek, because we watched that a lot growing up as kids. It really enjoyed it. It was really good stuff. Star Wars is pretty good too. But honestly, never really got into fiction all too much, but it's still interesting. Anyways, we can see them inside of the buildings of Klishkivka moving through. We see them advancing through the town. I mean, you see that they were largely facing relatively no opposition at this point. Of course, the Russians had largely retreated from the town a few weeks ago, but now the Ukrainians were physically moving in and capturing the village. We see them interviewing a Ukrainian soldier. We can see the Ukrainians continuing to advance. You see them now firing their rifles. It appears that this guy has an AK-74. You see the interview continuing. We now see them moving further through the village towards the eastern side near the railroad berm, firing through abandoned and destroyed buildings. Grenades going off like that one right there. And Tom Duke actually asked a question I will answer while we just saw that guy whip out the sickest of M16A2s, which is really nice looking. But someone said, do y'all like the new Star Trek series? I'll have to be honest with you. Not really. I mean, like, they're great, but I feel like they lose the premise of what Star Trek was, because the modern ones seem a little bit too gritty and pessimistic to me. Like, I really like Star Trek because it was very optimistic in what the future holds. And while there were bad actors, especially in the Next Generation, I mean, like, every admiral they ran up on was like a corrupt bastard. Like, at the same point, it was a very optimistic outlook of the future and was looking towards, like, being the ideal of what people should be. And I just feel like that's kind of lost in modern Star Trek. They try and make it too much of a gray area where, like, everything kind of goes, and it just doesn't really feel Star Trek-y because of that anymore. It's not like, people should always be looking out to be honest and, upstanding and upright, and all that stuff, like, kind of like trying to be the best people there are, it's like, it's fine if, you're not. And I'm like, that's not really Star Trek, though.
Man, I hate it too, because they took the Star Trek series and then they took the Twilight Zone too and just ruined both of them.
Yeah, and and still at the same time, I like to keep politics out of a lot of things. And it seems, and while Star Trek, and I have to say this, Star Trek was never scared of going into politics, but back in the day, they put an interesting veil on it where it was like a step away from real life, and you go, that's a really interesting way of looking at things. But nowadays, regardless of what they're going over, it just seems like they're trying to insert it too much into the modern world to make it in an interesting perspective. It's just like, I'm not really a big fan of it. And also another thing, really quickly, because I saw someone say something about Picard. Picard was a great premise for a show. I don't even know how in the world we got into the Star Trek thing, but Picard was a great premise of a show. And I feel like they killed it immediately when they sat there and had Picard painted as a villain that was having to redeem himself. I was like, how in the world is Picard a villain? Like, that's the whole thing I wasn't getting. Like, the Romulans hated him because he attempted to save Romulus? It's like, that's a really weird premise. Like, I watched the whole first season of Picard, And I didn't like how they immediately started off with Picard's an evil guy because he tried to save the Romulans, and he was able to save some of them, but a good amount of them still ended up being killed. It's like, wouldn't he still be hailed a hero for even trying? I mean, everyone in the Federation was writing them off for dead, and then they, and then they sit there and still make him out to be the bad guy. I was like, I don't get that at all. And then in the next season, they start off with Q, like, punishing him for existing. I'm like, come on. I mean, like, it's like Picard was a great captain. I feel like that episode should have been like him returning back to like the limelight, at very old age, but the limelight nevertheless. But instead, he's like a terrible guy for like no reason. Well, everyone views him like a terrible guy for no reason. He's having to go around and try and prove himself. It's like I didn't really get that premise at all. I was like, like Picard was my favorite captain, honestly. I was like, why in the world y'all dissing on my boy like that, But anyways, moving on from that, we got to see the evacuation of some wounded Ukrainian soldiers from the front line moving back into the war in seriousness. Of course, the battle was not won without casualties. There were some wounded, and we can see here them dealing with mortar fire as they evacuate the wounded soldiers. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but great to see that they were helping to evacuate the wounded soldiers from the area and making sure that they'll be able to get the medical help they need. Maybe even Doctors Without Borders, which is based out of Konstantinivka, just a few miles away, maybe taking on some of those soldiers and helping them with their surgical procedures, but who knows. With that, we're going to be moving on into our next clip, where we also got to see that the 3rd Brigade was keeping the push rolling. Oh, really quickly, I do have to pause this. I totally forgot about this. You are absolutely correct. And let me make sure I find the person who said that. Let's see here. Oh, dang, where the hell did it go? Someone said that the Strange New World series was really good, and I have to admit, it was incredibly good. It kind of went back to like Star Trek being like an ideal of what people should be, and I feel like it did it perfectly. By the way, Matthew, if you don't know about it, Strange New Worlds is a series that follows Captain Pike, who is the captain of the Enterprise before Kirk takes command of the Enterprise. So it goes over everything that he did, and it also goes over how he actually knew he was going to end up in the little wheelchair thing, and how he just accepted his fate because he was going to do the right thing and live up to, the ideal of a human standard of being honest and, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really good series. I've been able to see some of it, not all of it. And I love that one. I think it's really what Star Trek should be. And it kind of stays with the general like layout of what Star Trek is. It's about being an ideal person. It's something that'll never be reached, but it's still a very nice premise. And also, Mike Singer, thank you for bringing that up. I couldn't find you in the live chat when I went back to find that. But thank you so much for putting that in, because you are right. Strange New Worlds is a great modern Star Trek series. But we can see the 3rd Brigade hopping out of the back of the APC. And we now see the APC advancing, and the infantry are now going to follow behind in a column. Also, sorry everyone for going on about Star Trek, it was just an interesting thing. But getting back to the news, we can now see the 3rd Brigade infantry advancing behind the APC providing them a small amount of armor cover as they now close the distance to the tree line.
Y'all know Chekhov was a Russian, right? Just throwing that in there.
We now see some of the infantry splitting off to the right side and moving up through what appears to be an overgrown trench. We now see the rest of the infantry running down. You see the machine gunner accompanying these two guys that are now in the trench, and it appears they're going to be going through and clearing it as the APC continues to provide cover.
АГС дальше. Вижу, АГС стоит.
We now see them in the trees, clearing out Russian positions, firing into their bunkers. We now see the machine gunner giving it a shot, and oh, Matthew, look at what he's got, my boy. He's got a hollow, son. Get it.
Oh, it sure does. And what is this, an FAL or something?
No, this is a PKP machine gun.
Ah,
but my boy's got a hollow sun. I've seen hollow suns in this war more than any other optic like that. We now see them continuing to clear
gotta
up.
hook them up with some EOTechs or some better optics, though.
Man, get them Trigicons. Man, this guy, man, no full auto in the building. And now we can see them processing some of the Russian soldiers. We're going to be ending this clip right here, but nevertheless, great to see the 3rd Brigade continuing to push forward as Matthew turns into a feral hog on the microphone. Moving on from that, very interesting to see that they were able to continue to push forward and take a little bit of ground. We haven't seen that represented on the frontline map for Deep State yet, but we probably will tomorrow. Moving on from that and up into the northern flank, we also got to see near Berestove the destruction of a Tulpan heavy mortar by the 92nd. And we can also hear Eminem mixed with
along.
Man, we can hear the mix of Eminem and a Starbucks in the early 2000s mixed together into a single soundtrack. And I gotta say, the results are impressive.
All you need now is like a video of Ukrainian with their arm up on the steering wheel is driving casually down the road.
Man, 629, damn is fine. You know, all that stuff. To the window, to the wall. But anyways, we can see the Tulpan right over there.
Or if you're a Russian, to the floor.
Straight to the pits of hell, down to Satan's land. But that's for the Russians play. But anyways, we can see them hitting the Tulpan. We haven't seen an ammo detonation yet. We'll know it when we see it. Tulpans have a knack for turning into a small nuclear bomb. And I guess this one was empty or out of ammo or something because we haven't seen it go nuclear yet. We're seeing a small fire burning on it, though. Maybe the ammo's just taking a while to burn. Well, I guess it had no ammo because it didn't really explode. But a decent fire is burning on it, meaning that it will be taken out. But anyways, with that, that's the end of the clip. And wonderful to see that they were able to knock out another Tulpan heavy mortar. Moving on from that, we also got to see the Atom unit hitting Russian forces. Wait, hang on, Matthew. This is a little bit of an odd story, but it's the story of my life. You know, that's the kind of music that you play at the beginning of a movie that had that intro. But anyways, I don't know why we always
welcome back to today's vlog, folks. Good to see you guys. It's welcome back to my YouTube channel.
Hi, guys. Today, we're going to be abusing my children for internet
turn it
views.
off, turn it off, turn it off.
Wait, who's that? Ed Sheeran?
That's super copyrighted.
Oh, okay, good. Well, we muted it at least. It's still fair use anyways. We only played a little bit of it. It wasn't the whole thing.
Man, you young people and your music always turning it up so loud. We always got people coming down and knocking on our doors over it.
Man, my neighbors are always listening to loud drum and bass, and they'll never stop, and then you turn it back on. We can see the drone going right into the Russian bunker. Very wholesome poggers moment. We can see the vehicle getting hit in the rear. And now we can see it burning out both ends. Seems like it had a fun time on the town. Oh, you see it getting hit again. Man, I gotta tell you. And we can see the van burning up. And man, that thing's got a lot of gas in it or something because it's like a freaking oil well fire.
With the gas blade. Man,
right now some Russians saying there, this is the gas I wanted. I wanted that indica blade. Some stupid crap.
This is mid.
Man, Seth Rogen's in there. This is the gas I'm looking for.
Gosh.
Oh, man, I wish I could do his laugh because it's just so annoying. But anyways, we can see the fire.
I know some people love that guy, but man, is that laugh obnoxious. Good Lord. I think he does it on purpose, too.
I can't even do it, man. It just sounds like a baby coughing, you know, but grown up and like 30 years older. But anyways, that's the end of the clip. Great to see they were able to knock out another Russian vehicle with an FPV drone. And with that, we're now going to be moving on out of this area and down, well, actually past the southern front. We've already covered the news at the southern front. We're going to be moving on down into Melitopol because we got to hear of some massive explosions in that area. So check it out, y'all. Check it out. Or more so to the Russian bots, I hope they check it out. Because the Russians in that city, they checked in, but it appears they aren't checking out. And it seems as though most people are unanimous in the chat. They don't really like Seth Rogen.
I'm glad to hear it.
I'm glad to hear it because I just kind of find the guy generally annoying. It's kind of like I don't mean to like get into multiple rabbit holes tonight, but it's kind of like that Brett Krishner guy, the machine, you know? He has that one shtick, and that's all he has. It's like, you know, you got to come up with some more material. I mean, I'm not a comedian or anything, you know, so I don't want to be that big of a critic. But nevertheless, it's like, you know, you got to come up with something better. But hey, massive explosions in Melitopol. Russians are getting it.
Hey, look, they blew it up.
Wait, was that supposed to be like a Seth Rogen laugh?
Yeah, it was supposed to be a lame impersonation of
Hey, man, that's like the smoke coming out of my bong. Whatever the hell he does.
Oh, my God. Man, that laugh, like, brings my anxiety through the roof. Like you said, like a baby crying or something. Sends your blood pressure sky high. Like, it drives me crazy.
That's it, man. To me, it almost sounds like he's choking. It sounds like you're about to hear like the shuffling of silverware on a dinner table and hear, "Oh my God, call 911!" Like that's almost what I imagine every time he starts laughing. But anyways, moving on from that, out of that area, we did get one clip from the Kherson area on the Dnieper River today of an FPV drone hitting a Russian boat. So check it out. Y'all like it. Oh, Tetris music. Anyways, we can see the boat. It's just kind of making its way through the marsh.
It was kind of like Louisiana or something.
Ooh. Well, look, hey, it's spinning out. Dude, I've never seen a boat get hit and spin out like a car. Look at that. Watch. And then it gets hit. Oh, Blair, they've lost control. We're spinning. What the hell? How in the world did he... Anyways, I know how he did it. I'm not even going to say that. We can see another one getting hit as well. A little check mark at the bottom. And apparently this drone has a steel front. And apparently that boat just felt it. With that, that's the end of that
Army
clip.
of drones, donate now. Use 24.gov.
And also, by the way, I thought I'd share with you all this because this is something interesting. We're, of course, making sure to go through all due diligence to check this out, see how valid, to validify the information we've been given. But it is possible, because I've actually received an email this morning that we will be partnered with United 24 here a little bit in the future. We're, of course, not entirely sure because, you know, every once in a while there is a little weird email that comes through. But this one seemed a little bit more legit because I did a background check on the person who sent the email, and it does appear they may possibly work for United 24. But we got an email today actually offering us video help and also stories from Ukrainian soldiers from around the front line, courtesy of United 24. We don't really know if this is something that will follow through, but I thought I'd share that with y'all because it's pretty neat. Of course, no skin lost if it ends up being a spam email or something weird like that. Never gotten one before that says they're from United 24, but we will be waiting and seeing. If that is true, that's really neat, and it's great to know that people out there are apparently watching from somewhere, but if not, oh well. Moving on from that, though, it's time for us to move on from Ukraine and all the way back to the United States, because oddly enough, we're not going to Kyiv tonight. And also, Steve 64464 said, "Watch out for fakers," and we are. You know, because when I got the email, my general approach to emails is great skepticism. So when I saw that, I was like, let me make. You know, I'll ask them what the offer is and see about it. Because, you know, there's a possibility out there it could be. We always have to approach every situation like that. But there's also a chance that it may not be. But I'll share that with y'all. seems pretty neat to me. If it doesn't go through, I'll just let y'all know, it didn't really work out. It wasn't actually United 24. If it does go through, we may actually be partnered with United 24 here in the future, which will be really neat and really cool to say. But moving on from that and into New York City, we got to see that Zelensky was at the United Nations today and actually addressed the United Nations General Assembly in this speech. I don't know how much of it we will be able to play. It is 14 minutes long, not the longest UN address there has been at the General Assembly, but still a little lengthy. But nevertheless, here is the speech.
Not to deploy.
Also, by the way, he actually spoke in English the entire time.
Not to proliferate, not to threaten with, and not to test, but to promote a complete nuclear disarmament. Frankly, this is a good strategy, but it should not be the only strategy to protect the world from the final war. Ukraine gave up its third largest nuclear arsenal. The world then decided Russia should become a keeper of such power. Yet history shows it was Russia who deserved nuclear disarmament the most back in 1990s. And Russia deserves it now. Terrorists have no right to hold nuclear weapons. No right. But truly, not the nukes are the scariest now. While nukes remain in place, the mass destruction is gaining its momentum. The aggressor is weaponizing many other things, and those things are used not only against our country, but against all of yours as well. Fellow leaders, there are many conventions that restrict weapons, but there are no real restrictions on weaponization. First, let me give you an example. The food. Since the start of the full-scale war, the Ukrainian ports in the Black and Azov seas have been blocked by Russia. Until now, our ports on the Danube River remain the target for missiles and drones. And it is a clear Russia's attempt to weaponize the food shortage on the global market in exchange for recognition for some, if not all, of the captured territories. Russia is launching the food prices as weapons. The impact spans from the Atlantic coast of Africa to the Southeast Asia, and this is the threat scale. And I would like to thank those leaders who supported our Black Sea Grain Initiative and program Grain from Ukraine. Thank you so much. United, we made weapons turn back into food again. More than 45 nations saw how important it is to make Ukrainian food products available on the market, from Algeria to Spain to Indonesia and China. And even now, when Russia has undermined the Black Sea Grain Initiative, we are working to ensure food stability. And I hope that many of you will join us in these efforts. We launched a temporary sea export corridor from our ports, and we are working hard to preserve the land routes for grain exports. And it is alarming to see how some in Europe, some our friends in Europe, play out solidarity in political theater, making thriller from the grain. And they may seem to play their own role, but in fact, they are helping set the stage to a Moscow actor. Second, weaponization of energy. Many times the world has witnessed Russia using energy as a weapon. Kremlin weaponized oil and gas to weaken the leaders of other countries when they came to the Red Square. And now this threat is even greater. Russia is weaponizing nuclear energy. Not only it is not only it is spreading its unreliable nuclear power plant construction technologies, but it is also turning other countries' power plants into real dirty bombs. Look, please, what Russia did to our Zaporizhia power plant. Shelled it, occupied it, and now blackmails others with radiation leaks. Is there any sense to reduce nuclear weapons when Russia is weaponizing nuclear power plants? Scary question. The global security architecture offers no response or protection against such a treacherous radiation threat, and there is no accountability for radiation blackmailers so far. The short example is children. Children. Unfortunately, various terrorist groups abduct children to put pressure on their families and societies. But never before the mass kidnapping and deportation would become a part of the government policy. Not until now. We know the names of tens of thousands of children and have evidence on hundreds of thousands of others kidnapped by Russia in the occupied territories of Ukraine and later deported. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrant for Putin for this crime. And we are trying to get children back home. But time goes by. What will happen with them? What will happen to them? Those children in Russia are taught to hate Ukraine, and all ties with their families are broken. And this is clearly a genocide. When hatred is weaponized against one nation, it never stops there. Each decade, Russia starts a new war. Parts of Moldova and Georgia remain occupied. Russia turned Syria into ruins. And if not Russia, the chemical weapons would have never been used there in Syria. Russia has almost swallowed Belarus. It is obviously threatening Kazakhstan and other Baltic states. And the goal of the present war against Ukraine is to turn our land, our people, our lives, our resources into a weapon against you, against the international rules-based order. Many seats in the General Assembly Hall may become empty if Russia succeeds with its treachery and aggression. Ladies and gentlemen, the aggressor scatters deaths and brings ruins even without nukes, but the outcomes are alike. We see towns, we see villages in Ukraine wiped out by Russian artillery, leveled to the ground completely. We see the war of drones. We know the possible effects of spreading the war into the cyberspace. The artificial intelligence could be trained to combat well before it would learn to help the humanity. Thank God, people have not yet learned to use climate as a weapon. Even though humanity is failing on its climate policy objectives, this means that extreme weather will still impact the normal global life, and some evil state will also weaponize its outcomes. And when people in the streets of New York and other cities of the world went out on climate protest, we all have seen them. And when people in Morocco and Libya and other countries die as a result of natural disasters, and when islands and countries disappear underwater, and when tornadoes and deserts are spreading into new territories, and when all of this is happening, one unnatural disaster in Moscow decided to launch a big war and kill tens of thousands of people. We have to stop it. We must act united to defeat the aggressor and focus all our capabilities and energy on addressing these challenges. As nukes are restrained, likewise the aggressor must be restrained and all his tools and methods of war. Each war now can become final, but it takes our unity to make sure that aggression will not break in again. And it is not a dialogue between the so-called great powers somewhere behind the closed doors that can guarantee us all the new wars era, but open war of all nations for peace. Last year, I presented the outlines of the Ukrainian peace formula at the UN General Assembly. Later, in Indonesia, I presented the full formula. And over the past year, the peace formula became the basis to update the existing security architecture. Now we can bring back to life the UN Charter and guarantee the full power for the rules-based world order. And tomorrow, I will present the details at a special meeting of the UN Security Council. The main thing is that it is not only about Ukraine. More than 140 states and international organizations have supported the Ukrainian peace formula fully or in part. The Ukrainian peace formula is becoming global. Its points offer solutions and steps that will stop all forms of weaponization that Russia used against Ukraine and other countries and may be used by other aggressors. Look, for the first time in modern history, we have a real chance to end the aggression on the terms of the nation which was attacked. And this is a real chance for every nation to ensure that aggression against your state, if it happens, God forbid, will end, not because your land will be divided and you will be forced to submit to military or political pressure, but because your territory and sovereignty will be fully restored. We launched the format of meetings between national security advisors and diplomatic representatives. Important talks and consultations were held in Hiroshima, in Copenhagen, and in Jeddah on the implementation of the peace formula. And we are preparing a global peace summit. And please, I invite all of you who do not tolerate any aggression to jointly prepare the summit. And I am aware of the attempts to make some shady dealings behind the scenes. Evil cannot be trusted. Ask Prigozhin if one bets on Putin's promises.
Oh.
Please, hear me. Let unity decide everything openly. While Russia is pushing the world to the final war, Ukraine is doing everything to ensure that after Russian aggression, no one in the world will dare to attack any nation. Weaponization must be restrained. War crimes must be punished. Deported people must come back home. And the occupier must return to their own land. We must be united to make it. And we'll do it. Slava Ukraini.
And Herom Slava. And Herom Slava. And damn, man, he dropped it heavy at the end right there. I was like, good Lord. But nevertheless, that was the end of Zelensky's speech. We were only going to play a part of it, but after a while, I saw some of y'all were enjoying it. I just decided we're going to let the thing run its whole course. But what a speech. That was certainly a speech to go down in the books in the NATO Assembly. I'm sorry, the UN General Assembly. And a very interesting one, to say the least. But now having that speech out of the way, it's time for the second half of this stream. I also have to let y'all know we have about probably 30 minutes at the most to be able to answer all of the super chats and live chats. And Matthew, how many super chats do we have in the queue right now?
We currently have about 25.
All right, so we have about 25 super chats. which we are going to be trying to cover within the next 30 minutes, and we're also going to be trying to get to some live chats as well. The reason why I have to put a time cap on it tonight is because I can't be exhausted every single day like I was today. I ended up not even being able to go to law school today because I was just so worn out from going on and on and on for about a month and a half at this point. So we want to make sure to try and minimize the amount of time that's held here. But of course, before we do that, while I won't be able to spend a massive amount of time on a live chat or a super chat individually, I do want to thank each and every one of y'all so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. It means a massive deal to us. Y'all are the ones who help us to be able to pay the bills, to do this as a full-time job. And if it wasn't for y'all making this possible, we wouldn't even be here tonight. And so thank y'all so much once again. And we're now about to be moving on into the polls and the questions. But Matthew will have to make our address to the polls very brief to make sure we can get to all of the questions and live chat.
Yes.
So with that, what do we got?
All right, so our first poll says, is it possible to disarm Russia of nukes, as Zelensky suggests in his speech? 64% said no, that is very unrealistic. 27% said yes, we can take them from Russia, and 9% said unsure. And I would have to say right off the bat, while I do support Ukraine 100%, and Zelensky had a very good speech, that is very unrealistic to simply just try to take nukes from Russia. That is probably never going to happen, but, you know, it is wishful thinking. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, great idea in premise. Honestly, I would be for doing that for every nation in the world, but sadly, wouldn't never be possible. We would never be able to denuclearize the Russians. That's something they would have to do themselves. There's only one nation in history that had nuclear weapons and gave them all up, and that was South Africa. And the only reason they did it is because they largely really weren't able to fund the maintenance of nuclear weapons. So beyond that, I don't really think that's realistic. Great idea, but not realistic. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next poll says, in your opinion, is the UN General Assembly a productive forum for global cooperation? 42% said no, it's a symbolic and pointless forum. 29% said yes, it allows for communication. 21% said it has only a few advantages. And 7% said unsure. And for me, I would have to say that in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I think it's a symbolic and somewhat pointless forum. While we do get to hear good speeches every once in a while, like for example the one from Zelensky, typically it's just people getting up and espousing their beliefs with no real intent to discuss anything, and it's really not productive. It's more symbolic than anything. And to say it's a forum for cooperation, I think that's a real stretch. And, you know, it is what it is. People just get up and say their piece. Everybody else that doesn't like you still don't like you after the speech, and nothing changes. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would largely have to agree with your statement. I believe it's more so of a forum than anything. It's not really a necessarily useful forum. You could just kind of have these forums whenever you want and try and get as many nations together as possible to see how it would be done. It's just not that productive. There are other groups out there like the G7 that are actually productive groups and alliances. There's NATO. There's actually productive groups out there. There are also unproductive groups out there like the UN. Beyond getting to hear what a standing of a nation is on a certain subject, it isn't really beneficial for anything beyond that. Their humanitarian efforts are good, but they don't really produce the results people are looking for. Most UN aid, for example, in Africa, ends up being snatched up by warlords in the area, so the aid doesn't even make it to the people, and the warlords usually weaponize UN aid after seizing it against the people, so that way the people are more subservient to their wishes. So even then, even on the humanitarian side of things, the UN isn't as effective as it should be. So I'd largely say it's just a nice forum, but beyond that, doesn't really serve an actual purpose in the world, at least to me. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our last poll says the lost F-35 was finally located by the military in the woods in the United States, and the Marines have ordered a halt to all flights for a couple of days as a result. And what are your thoughts? 43% said it's just a safety precaution by the USA. 30% said something concerning is going on. 20% said it seems odd, but I need more info. And 7% said unsure. And the whole situation is kind of odd. At first, I'll be honest, I thought it was maybe just a mishap, but something seems a little bit weird about the entire situation. I'm not sure why the Marines have ordered a halt to all the flights. I don't know how that's going to fix anything, because if this was a one-off mishap, then why is there a need to ground all the flights? That's kind of a strange thing to me. And also, the military would not let anybody near the crash site. We finally got some footage, I think about an hour ago, of the crash site in the woods. But overall, there's a lot of secrecy going on around it, which is kind of weird considering it was just a plane that crashed in the woods. So some people are speculating, and it's just pure speculation, that maybe it was hacked. I'm not sure if that's even possible, but that seems to be what a lot of folks out there are saying that may or may not know what they're talking about, but that is the general consensus of the moment in the conspiracy world. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would actually have to disagree with you on almost everything you said right there, Matthew. I would
What?
actually, yeah, I would
Why?
actually. Well, I'll let me explain. Hold on,
tell
damn
me.
it. I'm just kidding with you. But to answer why, one, grounding all of the aircraft in the world is actually kind of normal. You remember when that Black Hawk crashed in northern Alabama and 3 crew members were killed on board?
Yeah, but that was because of a issue with the actual airframe itself, though.
Well, yeah,
like
but
the Black Hawk helicopter.
But the Department of the Army then grounded all Black Hawks worldwide for 2 days after that incident, so that way they could have an investigation into the issue with that Black Hawk and see if it was something that was going to be a fleet-wide issue. It's actually fairly normal for something like that to happen in the military whenever there's an incident involving the loss of a vehicle. They usually stop all of those vehicles from operating for a few days to figure out if anything was wrong with them. So that part of things fairly mundane from the the administrative side of things. Doesn't really seem like anything's exceptional there. Not letting people near the F-35 is also something that's completely understandable as well. The F-35 is the newest, latest, and greatest aircraft in the entire arsenal of the U.S. Department of Defense. It's 20 years ahead of probably everything else in the world. And so letting anyone near that, who's to say a PLA, well, not a PLA, but a Chinese spy, a Chinese communist spy doesn't end up showing up in the middle of the forest and tries to find something out about the F-35 that the Chinese may have not known before, like maybe how the inside of the airframe is built or anything else, or maybe even absconds with a piece of a computer system. That's a possibility, so that's probably why they weren't letting anyone near the aircraft at all. I would have to say it most likely wasn't hacked either. I don't really think that's a likely option because no aircraft before, an aircraft that's actually operated by a pilot, has been hacked. And also, if it was hacked, what would have been the aim of the hacking? It didn't. No country ever came into possession of it. When other drones have been hacked before, for example, by Iran, they land them in their territory and they're able to tear them apart and reverse engineer them. But with this one, it just ended up crashing into the woods in South Carolina. So it didn't really end up giving anyone a benefit to hack the thing. So in my opinion, I would have to say everything about that's fairly mundane. I have a feeling that there was probably some kind of a mechanical issue that the pilot thought was going on. He ejected out of the plane while it was flying, thinking it was going to crash, and then it just kept on flying, and then that became the situation. It's happened before. It happened with the MiG-23 for the East Germans in several other countries before through history, but the East Germans is the best example I can think of. So to me, I just think it's largely just an incident that happened, nothing exceptional. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And I gotta say, my gut's telling me something is suspicious about it, and we might find out later or might not, but with the way that this situation being handled, it's most likely it'll be covered up if there is something that we don't know about under secrecy. But the fact that we're not able to track an F-35, putting all the politicians, goofy statements aside because everybody wants to take a political jab when something like this happens, it's kind of odd to me that we don't have a way to track the jet except for radar. It would seem like we'd have another way to keep up with it. And the fact we totally lost track of it, didn't know where it went, and it flew across our own country undetected, kind of rings a little bit weird to me as well. And the whole situation around, just the whole thing, like the secrecy around it, and not being able to track it's kind of weird. I see some folks saying, no. But, if you have an $80 million jet, a modern one, and you can't track it, that's certainly odd. Surely we have a way to do that.
Well, I mean, we don't. And if we did, if there's a way to track it, that means there's a way for the enemy to track it as well if they find out what that is. So you can't really make anything that makes it trackable. Otherwise, what would the point of it being stealth be? Like you could make it stealth and then go, well, you put a little transponder on it that puts out a ping so that way we know where it is every once in a while. And then the Russians eventually go, well, you know, they've 20 years ahead of us, but we figured out they have this ping on the plane that goes off every 5 minutes or so, and we can figure out where the plane is based off of the ping. Here's the frequency it runs on, and then they know where.
But
the
you can turn that on
is.
and off. Like when it's operating in the U.S., there's no need for that to be shut off for it to be, you know, flying in stealth and secret because it's in our own country. So why was it apparently off?
Well, I mean, you know, I don't know, but I'd still feel like for a stealth plane to have some kind of an active pinging system on it would be a little weird. It would beat the stealth thing to it. And also, if you're saying it may possibly be hacked, who's to say that someone wouldn't then hack the F-35, not really knowing where it is, but just send out a general hack, and then automatically turn the transponder on and then give away the F-35's location in the middle of a war zone. So, you know, there's a whole bunch. I mean, to me, it just seemed mundane to me. But with that, we've got to keep on a tight schedule. With that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on from our poll segment, we are moving into our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a $100 donation. And real quick, let me use my brain and get rid of this bot. We have a $100 donation from Richard Ager. And thank you very much, Richard, for that support very much. That is very generous of you. And he says, this is a crystal ball question. Putin is notorious for subduing his opposition by killing them off. Is this sustainable, or will he overstep his support? And what's a good guess as to when he might have overstepped?
And I thank you so much for the mass amount of support, Richard Agur. A very big crystal ball question right there. But to answer that, I would say he probably won't overstep his support because of that, because a lot of people do that as a mode of operation or a form of governance, and it hasn't really worked poorly for them, at least when they do it the right way. Kim Jong-un, or the Kim family for the most part, is the best example of that from North Korea. They kill off everybody eventually, but they do it in a way that's slow enough and non-invasive for the most part to most of the government organization that it doesn't set off alarm bells for most of them. And so I would say for Putin, with the way he's been going about it, I mean, like, the amount of people that's been killed that we know clearly were assassinated by him is pretty high, but it's not high over a given period of time. Like, if 10 people got killed in a single day, that would set off alarm bells in the government. But it's just like one person every few weeks or a month or 2 months apart. So it doesn't really set off a lot of alarm bells for most of the people in the Russian government. They go, well, he was unfortunate, but it's not going to be me. And then they have enough time to kind of let their worries go away before the next guy is killed, and then it starts all over again. And also, that keeps a lot of people in line in Russia as well, because they go, this guy was killed. Everyone else is scared to say anything because they might be killed. So I think I'm the only person who's scared that I might be killed. So let me just keep that to myself and hide and not say anything about it. So it also has that effect as well, as while a frog comes up in my throat. But with that, thank you. Wait, what's a good system when he might have overstepped? As far as overstepping, if he killed Surovikin, Shoigu, and maybe another Russian general all at the same time in the same day, that would be overstepping. That would freak out everyone in the Russian army so badly, they would think they're next, and he would lose the support of the army. And if the public rises up at that time, and the army's also scared, the army and the public is the most potent weapon to overthrowing a government. In fact, you have to the public has to have the support of the armed forces for a revolution or a coup to ever be successful. And you will see that time and time again through history. There has to be general support in the public as well as an armed force going up against the government to actually overthrow one. So if they meet those two requirements, I think Putin will have overstepped his bounds by that point. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Richard, and helping this channel to keep on running. You're helping the lights to keep on. You're helping us to pay the bills, and we are greatly appreciative, and thank you so much for that. And also, thank you for being an old guard here in the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And our next super chat goes to Praise Adonai, a longtime channel legend as well. He puts in a $100 donation, and thank you very much, Praise Adonai, for that. And he said, Matt, everything on YouTube is either clickbait or recycled news now, and there are extremely few places where the truth is spoken. But thanks to you for the great job that y'all do. And the question is, why do the U.S. military experts diss the Ukrainian possibility of winning?
And thank you for the massive amount of support, Praise Adonai. And also, great to have you back. I don't think I've seen you throw in a super chat in a long, long time. And I got to thank you so much for the massive support and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And to answer your question, let's see. Why do U.S. military experts diss the Ukrainian possibility of winning? The reason why is the exact same reason why they said at the beginning of the war the Ukrainians would only last 4 days, is because it seems like it would not make sense that a smaller country can beat a larger one in a conventional war. It just doesn't make any, and it doesn't make any sense on a logical level when you're only considering those factors. Russia is a larger country economically, population-wise, militarily. It's larger than Ukraine in every way, in actual metrics. And by those metrics alone, the Russians should be able to beat the Ukrainians just by sheer size alone. They're 3 times larger in population. I believe they're about 5, well, hell, I think they're way larger than 5 times larger economically than the Ukrainians. I think they're somewhere around 6 or 7 times larger. They have a much larger military on paper. All of those things would indicate that they would win. But then there's not things that are considered like poor training, poor morale, poor pay. There's things like that that aren't considered. Poor supply lines, poor logistics, foreign support, how much support the Ukrainians are getting, who can keep up what kind of fire where, what kind of generals do they have in charge, what are their personalities. What in the world is the weather going to impact these kinds of situations? What if certain things and certain checkpoints and goals aren't met at certain points in the war? Those types of things are usually not considered by U.S. military experts. And I always want to say, I don't really like the idea of anyone being a war expert. I have a feeling that there's people out there who subject this war and they give opinions on it, but there's really no one who's truly an expert, because so far, a lot of those U.S. military experts have been wrong on nearly everything throughout the war. All the way from how long it should last to who's going to win, they've nearly been wrong on everything. And so whenever I hear the U.S. military experts say, oh, well, the Ukrainians are probably not going to win the war, I'm like, I'm kind of doubting you because you've been wrong on everything so far, so who's to say you're not wrong on that one too? But still, I hope that does answer that well, and thank you so much for the support. And also, thank you so much for saying that this is a channel where the truth is spoken, and we try our best to make sure that the news is accurate as possible to what's going on. And I thank you so much for the support and giving us some high praise. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And unfortunately, we're going to have to speed up drastically because we are going to run overtime no matter how fast we go at this point. So up next, we have a $25 donation from Aaron Shu. And thank you very much, Aaron, for that support. And he says, crazy idea with all the blown up Russian equipment melted down and use it to rebuild Ukraine. And take a question from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support. That would be a pretty cool idea. Maybe they could sell it for scrap and make some money off of that. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for support. And we will make sure to grab a question from the chat.
And the live chat question goes to Keeper of the List, who says, Matt, have you talked about the British spy plane fired by Russians?
Fired by Russians? Fired on by Russians or fired by Russians?
I guess fired on.
I have heard about that. That happened a long time ago, actually, last year. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat and helping us keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Richard Ager once again, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you, Richard, once more for that support. He says the MRE's hilarious. And the fact someone thinks it's real, seriously, OMG. And nonetheless, thinking of a question to follow with another donation.
And thank you so much for the support. And also, thank you so much once again for helping the channel to keep on running. Also, another thing, I'm saying also so much because I'm trying to figure out how to make sure that we keep with a strict timetable here. The MRE thing is ridiculous to me, and it shows how gullible people are. A lot of people actually took that at face value and said, oh my god, look how they're wasting Western money, and didn't even think about, wait a minute, how in the world is that supposed to stay good for 5 years inside of an MRE pack? It wouldn't. But still, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Judy McDonough, who puts in a $20 donation and does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Judy, for that support very much and helping to keep this whole thing running. And we do appreciate it. And up next, we have a 20 from none other than Jay Bagwell. And he says, great stream, lads. And I'm visiting the HK Defense Facility and sent you a picture of the new French Army contract HK416 made in Germany. I need to take a look at that, by the way. Sounds cool. He says, also sent you a pic.
And thank you so much for the support, Jay. And I will be checking that out after stream. And also, really cool to hear that they're going to be getting HK416s. That's really neat. And also really cool to know that you're at HK in general. I mean, HK's got a brand reputation behind them, and it's a pretty good one, to say the least. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the kind words, Jay. Thank you for sharing that with us. And also, Jay, I might have to hit you up here soon for that private range membership, because the public ranges, they're loud. And they're indoors, and my ears hurt, and I'm also breathing in a lot of lead, which gives me a headache every single time. So I might have to check in with you on that, but thank you so much once again for support, and really cool to hear that you're out there doing things with the HK company. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, this one goes to Beef Taco, who puts in a 20 and says a contribution to the coffee fund and enjoy. And thank you very much, Beef Taco. Thank you.
And thank you so much for the contribution to the coffee fund, Beef Taco. And I gotta say, I love beef tacos. I mean, you can't beat them, but fish tacos are killer good. Like, beef tacos are good.
Man, coffee and tacos is great.
Man, I'm telling you, man, especially when you get that nitro cold brew with a shot of espresso. Oh my lord, your heart's exploding. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Beef Taco, and we will make sure to enjoy. And so with that, thank you once again, and we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Keta Creek, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much for that support as well. They said, thank you for raising awareness and providing good information. Also, as an American, I want to thank you for being the voices of unity.
And I thank you.
Thank you. That's very high praise.
And I thank you so much, Keta Creek, for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And thank you for having some very high praise about the information and news we put out here. And also, thank you for saying we're a voice of unity. It's really weird to think of it that way, but it's kind of true. We're really one of the only standalone news reporting kind of channels out there of any kind, YouTube, television, whatever, that doesn't really take a stance, a partisan stance in anything political. We just stand for, you know, what for Ukraine, and that's it. So it's pretty nice to know that we're one of the few that do that. And I thank you so much for supporting us and helping us to keep this thing running, so that way we can still be around in this exact way, shape, and form years down the road if we have to be. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And guess what? We got a super chat from none other than Duncan VR, who puts in a 28 Australian. Yes, hey! Australian. He comes from the land where that fella said, oh, a succulent meal? Can I not have a succulent Chinese meal?
Get your hands off my...
And Duncan says, Ba Muba. Matt was at the transporter bay. Ba ba. Meow. He went up and beam up. Enforcer. Ba rough. He pressed a button and a sheep appeared. And the sheep said, oh, man, I'm telling you. Oink rough. Enforcer getting sleepy. German word.
Get sleep, my lightning. And thank you so much.
Dear.
Dear. But thank you so much once again for the support, Duncan VR. And helping this channel to keep on running. There's folks like you with the traditional animal noises and the support help us to keep this thing running. If it wasn't for folks like you who supported this channel, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. And so thank you so much once again for support, and thank you for throwing in the traditional animal noises. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And the next one goes to Cliff H, who puts in a 13 and says, Challengers rolled MiG-8s, flew. Enforcers are here to show us the news.
And you kind of broke up there, Matthew. Could you reread that one again?
Challengers rolled. MiG-8s flew. Enforcers are here to show us the news.
And we are. So thank you so much once again for the support. I'm supposing that's supposed to be a rhyme. And man, he busted in rhymes. But still, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again, Cliff H, for being an old guard and supporting the channel.
Yes, and up next we have a $10 donation from Blue Flame 777, who says, welfare chicks matter. Send to chat.
Well, I thank you for support, Blue Flame 777, and them welfare chicks, they do matter. And so with that, thank you for the support, and let's make sure to get a live chat.
And the live chat question goes to Wandering, who says, I heard they found some of that missing F-35, and do you know the story on that? And man, I'm telling you, we went over the story on that, and I'm telling you, some people don't buy the conspiracy theory, and some people do. So, you know, it's half and half. Not really. It's more like hardly anybody buys the conspiracy theory. To be honest, I really don't either. I'm just saying something's up with it. But I don't buy the conspiracy theory that it was really hacked because I'm not even sure if that's possible with an F-35. Because how do you connect to it, you know? But the part that is funny is why the transponder was turned off in our own country with the thing being tracked by our own military. That's kind of weird. But, you know, it is what it is.
Well, you know, I mean, you know.
And Enforcer, what you got?
Well, I got. What happened? Well, I would love to say something, but honestly, I don't even remember what the live chat is at this point. But with that, I do thank you for the support and sponsoring that live chat. I hope Matthew was able to address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
The next one goes to ABCD, who puts in a 10 and says, great job, Enforcers. Thank you for your hard work, and please take a question from the LSA friends.
And thank you so much for the support and enjoying this channel and supporting it to help it to keep running. Folks like you make this thing possible day in and day out with y'all's continued support through the super chats, which is the only way we can keep this channel running. And we will make sure to get a live chat question in your name, ABCD, ABCD. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and long live the Lee Spring Army. What do we got, Matthew?
This one goes to Judy McDonough, who says, why can't they start a new Security Council and exclude Russia from it?
Because that would require a vote to be passed by the current UN Security Council, and it would probably be vetoed. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you once again for sponsoring that live chat, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Sick Lid, who puts in a 10 and says, I vote for a 5-day-a-week LSA show. You guys can't be missing classes.
And
I'm telling you.
Thank you for the support. Very interesting idea. But it has to run 6 days a week. In the Lee Spring Army, we believe in having a cake and eating it. And if that means that we run until the wheels fall off, we run until the wheels fall off. That's just the way it works around here. I'm not into having breaks. I'm not into mental health. I'm not into any of that stuff. I believe in running yourself ragged and then running yourself even further. But still, thank you once again for support. And thank you for the kind idea. But I'm a little stupid, and I believe in just running myself ragged. So with that, what do you have to say, Jack?
I gotta say, we're moving on to the next one. This one goes to Judy McDonough again, who puts in a $10 donation. It says, Russia has joined the lowest of the low, begging for North Korea to help them. Unimaginable.
You know they have, Judy McDonough, when they sit there and say, North Korea, could we please have bombs? And then the North Koreans are like, will you feed us? And they go, maybe. You know they've entered the next level of like, poverty for a country. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. I have to agree, unimaginable that we would live in a world where the Russians are begging North Korea for weapons. But still, thank you so much once again. Hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to BC Skyman. Shout out to him who puts in a $5 donation this time. And thank you very much, BC, for that support. We also have a 5 from CK Bold who says, take a live chat question. And of course we will. And the live chat question is going to go to... let's see. It goes to W13RD guy who says, do you think India and Canada will mend their fences?
Wait, hang on. Reread that again.
The context is Canada has accused India of, I believe, killing someone. I'm not sure exactly who, involving some Sikh or something like that, I believe.
The Sikh leader was killed. Canada's wanting to investigate it. The United States backed away. It's a part of a diplomatic deal. We're trying to be friends with the Indians. This is really our only hope of countering the Chinese in the Black Sea right now. So we're not doing anything to piss off the Indians because they're our only hope right now to deal with the Chinese. So maybe they'll mend their fences. Hopefully they will. I don't know what the hell Canada's doing, honestly, wanting to investigate that and piss the Indians off. I understand the whole moralistic premise of it, but at the same time, we're currently trying to get the Indians on our side so we can build a sub-base down there in the southern tip of India to deal with the Chinese trying to do the Belt and Road program. So why in the world are the Canadians possibly sabotaging that? I don't know. A little weird. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for support. And also, by the way, really quickly, not trying to say the Sikhs are unimportant people. Sikhs are actually some of the nicest people you'll ever meet. But nevertheless, this is global diplomacy that we're working with right here, and the Chinese are a much greater threat than that situation itself. We're having to deal with two necessary evils here. I would rather pick the Indians than the Chinese. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you once again for support, and with that, we are on to the next one.
Like the fellow said, this is Democracy Manifest. But anyways, moving on to our next one, we have a $10 donation from SY Tiger 907. And good to see you once again. And they said, sup, and hope y'all are having a good night. Or I hope y'all are well and having a good night. Either one.
And thank you so much for supporting. We've been having a good night so far. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Neil Vizanot, who puts in a 5 and says, could we technically kick Russia out of the UN because the USSR was a member and not the Russian Federation? Man, you're getting all legal up in here.
Man, you're trying to get out that legalese. But to answer that, Russia is the inheritor of the seat. That was decided back in 1991, and we sadly can't go and retroactively reverse decisions like that. It's something that we can't undo now. That if we didn't want them to have that seat, we shouldn't have allowed them to have it in 1991. It's just too late to do that now. But with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, some people are saying in the live chat, man, India is anti-American. Not that much. Not that much. They might be on some levels, but Modi is starting to buddy up with the United States. We can't really risk that. I would love to explain the whole geopolitical situation as to why we can't do something like that right now. And some people are saying, well, if an Indian killed an American on American soil, would you let that go? No. No, the guy would be arrested, see, because that's murder in the United States. You're in the United States. But at the same time, I wouldn't sit there and start trying to throw daggers at the Indians because of it, because that's a diplomatic situation that we're now screwing up for something that was largely a domestic affair inside the United States dealing with a foreign national. And then if they wanted to protest that, that's a little bit of a different story. But trying to go out of your way to create a diplomatic row over a situation that you deal with internally inside the country isn't a smart idea in this kind of situation. And so with that...
Exactly.
And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Cody D362, who puts in a 3 and says, Slav Ukraine and Hiram Slava. And I agree with you 100%. Slav Ukraine.
And I agree with that 1,000%. Top that. Slav Ukraine. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And thank you, Cody, for being a guard of this channel and supporting us and helping us to keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the last one here is from P. Sar, who puts in a 2 and says, for the Wyatt Earp Memorial Fund. And rest in peace to him.
And thank you so much, PSR, for the support to the Wyatt Earp Memorial. They're gone but not forgotten. And thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And moving on to our live chat questions. Up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. We have Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, and Tightlines LSO. They said tonight's Morse reads, the Samun is soon going to be joining the salmon swimming around the Moskva. Long live the LSA, same as Saturday and Sunday. What's happening, man?
Oh my God, man. I made a new one tonight. I didn't change it. But thank you for deciphering that Morse code message. That's the sound of money. You know, got that dead on the nail. I'm sorry. I actually had a new one set up for tonight. It was going to be about raising $9,674 for Doctors Without Borders and how the LSA did an amazing job. But that Morse code message apparently didn't make it in. But congratulations on getting that correct. The same message for the third time in a row. And with that, we're now moving on into the live chats. Due to time constraints, and actually I was just told by Matthew, because I was about to say we're doing 3. Matthew just told me we only have 2. Only 2 live chats.
That's all we have. That's all that's left. All the bread's been sold.
We've answered all of the other ones because so many of y'all have said take a live chat along with y'all super chat. We've actually ended up answering most of them in the spreadsheet already. So we have 2 live chats to answer, and we're going to be moving on to those right now. And so with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to MGP, who says, do the cruise missiles numbers reflect missiles that hit their target as well or only shot down?
What happened? Reread the line.
Do the cruise missiles numbers reflect missiles that hit their target as well or only shot down?
I'm not understanding that question.
Do the cruise missile numbers, the numbers of cruise missiles shot, do they reflect missiles that only hit their target or the ones that are only shot down?
I hate to say it, for some reason that's not really computing in my mind. Matthew's saying it like it's computing in his, it's not in mine. But I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one. Terribly sorry about that. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and this one goes to Wondering, who says, does the balloon-carried Ukraine flag show that trolling is an effective war tactic? Oh, and hell yeah, trolling is effective. Yeah, if you control your enemy, you can make them angry, hurt their morale, and some of them are so rough that they end up becoming psyops, and you know how that goes. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta tell you, trolling is the way of war, damn it. You gotta troll the hell out of these people. And see, it works. It worked in that situation. It's worked in almost every other situation as well. Think of all the times that people have been trolled in war and it's worked. It's worked more than it's failed. I'll tell you that right off the bat. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank all of y'all so much once again for watching. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to run the stream for y'all 6 days a week. And tonight is no exception. I thank 6,000 of y'all for showing up tonight and watching the news. Not the highest audience we've had recently, but nevertheless, we are always honored to know that so many of y'all come here each and every night to get the news from this channel. If y'all did enjoy and are new, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because we run this channel 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every night but Monday, covering the news of the war in Ukraine on the live stream, and then almost every day of the week. We can't guarantee every day, but almost every day of the week, we run short war videos as well, which are about 10 to 15 minutes long, that cover specific large details about the war on that given day. But with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and it was over 9,000, Neil, and thank you once again for the support. And with that, I will see you all tomorrow. Long live the Lee Spring Army.
And good night, LSA. Thank you all for another great stream, and we'll see you all tomorrow night, as well as on the Short War Summary, and Slava Ukraine.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, лейтенант.